Chapter 70. Crack, clang. A cracking sound was heard. The great elder widened his eyes in shock. He stared at the sharp sword in her hand, which was glowing with a green light, then looked at the crack on his own sword. His heart sank. In the next moment, the long sword in his hand was broken by his opponent's sword aura and fell to the ground with a clang. At the same time, he was sent flying by the terrifying sword aura before he could retreat in time. Hiss. Ah! He lost his balance and stumbled backwards. Fortunately, the fourth elder caught him and prevented him from falling to the ground in a sorry state. How can this be? How can it be the emerald-edged sword? He stared in disbelief at the treasured sword in her hand, which was glowing with a green light. The green light on the blade was so dazzling. In the entire world, only the emerald-edged sword had its own green light. He was not the only one. The fourth elder and the second master of the Shu family were equally shocked. However, aside from being shocked, they were also filled with greed. Greed for the treasured sword. The emerald-edged sword was a treasure amongst sword. The emerald-edged sword, which had disappeared for so many years, had finally seen the light of day again. Furthermore, they had encountered it. How could they not be excited? How could they not be greedy and want to take it for themselves? The emerald-edged sword pointed diagonally to the ground. The green light faintly floated and her red robes fluttered in the wind. A bloodthirsty aura filled the air from her body. She looked at the shocked and greedy trio, and the corners of her lips curled up slightly, revealing an evil and cold smile. Anyone who sees this sword of mine must die. As soon as she finished speaking, the red figure shot out like a demon. However, she did not charge towards the great elder and the fourth elder. Instead, she turned around and raised the emerald-edged sword in her hand. A swift and fierce sword aura sliced through the air. Hiss. The second master of the Shu family was caught off guard and his throat was slit. Because he was caught off guard and because he did not have time to dodge. Even in death, his eyes were wide open in disbelief. Even in death, he could not take a single breath because his heart was filled with unwillingness. Second master. The great elder and the fourth elder cried out in alarm as they watched the figure stiffly fall down. In the blink of an eye, a life disappeared before their eyes just like that. Moreover, because her sword was too fast, the blood at his throat did not seep out for a moment. It was only when he fell and pulled at the fatal wound on his neck that scarlet blood spurted out like a blood fountain and dyed the ground red. That was the brother that the patriarch valued the most. Now that he was dead as well, they were truly unable to imagine how furious the patriarch would be when they returned. Seeing the expressions on their faces, Feng Jiu chuckled. Do you think you can go back alive? From the moment she took out the azure-edged sword, she had no intention of letting the three of them leave alive. This alley would be the place where their lives would end. His half-squinted eyes flashed with a cold light, and his killing intent overflowed. The red figure also swept towards the two people. The green sword in his hand moved slightly, and the biting cold sword aura turned into a sword blade that swept out. Kill her! The two of them roared angrily. The great elder waved his broken sword and charged forward. The fourth elder also drew his sword and attacked from all sides. The two of them worked together, and the aura of a martial master at the peak of the martial master realm immediately filled the alley, causing the atmosphere in the air to congeal and become oppressive. Clang! Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh! As the swords and blades clashed, the sharp air currents and clanging sounds could be heard from time to time. What made the two of them aghast was the bloodthirsty killing intent and her crafty and fatal attacks. They were somewhat overwhelmed and panicked. Chapter 71. With a cry of alarm, fourth elder, who had been pushed back, was unable to stop it in time. He could only watch helplessly as great elder's broken sword was sent flying. The green-edged sword, which was glowing with a green light, pierced his chest with a whoosh. He could even see great elder's look of disbelief in that instant. He was so dissatisfied and so astonished. It was as if he could not believe that he had died at the hands of someone whom he had looked down upon. Seeing the great elder's body twitch as he fell to the ground, his eyes wide open in death, his heart trembled. He looked at the woman in the red dress and saw that she had pulled out her sword and was looking at him. Almost at that moment, he instinctively wanted to run. Yes, run. That was the only thought in his mind. His body instinctively reacted to run away. However, just as he moved, a ghostly voice rang in his ears. I've said it before. Anyone who has seen the green-edged sword must die. Once the cold and bloodthirsty voice rang out, her red robes flashed and blocked Fourth Elder's path. She looked at the pale-faced man with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Where do you think you're running to? Ah! He cried out loudly and raised the long sword in his hand. After injecting his profound energy into it, he fiercely slashed it towards her. With nowhere to run, he could only fight to the death. Even though he had been shocked by her strange skills during their previous exchange, he had no other choice now. For the sake of survival, he released all the profound energy in his body. The aura of a martial master at the full circle of the martial master surged, causing the dust and sand on the ground to swirl up. I don't believe that I, a martial master at the full circle, would lose to a damned girl like you. He cried out fiercely. The profound energy in his entire body surged and raised his speed to the maximum. As he rushed forward, his figure was as fast as a whirlwind and as fierce as a tiger. Seeing this, Fengjiu also released all the profound energy in her body. Her advantage was not her profound energy, but the green-edged sword in her hand and her crafty, fatal attack. She did not intend to compete with him in terms of profound strength. What she wanted to do was to kill him in the shortest amount of time. Otherwise, the commotion here would quickly attract some cultivators. At that time, it would be difficult to escape. The red figure flashed out. Borrowing the ferocity of the green-edged sword, every strike of her sword was a fatal killing move. Her movements were fast and ruthless. Even if the Fourth Elder was on guard, he could not block the green-edged sword intent and her fatal attacks. Time to end this. She held the sword with both hands, and in the instant that he was pushed back, she poured her profound energy into the green-edged sword, and with a quick and ruthless strike, she fiercely chopped down on him. The Fourth Elder instinctively tried to block the attack with his sword, but, clang, hiss. A blood-curdling scream pierced through the air, and the sword in the Fourth Elder's hand was broken by Fengjiu, and his entire body was cleaved into two halves, falling to the ground. Fengjiu's gaze swept across the three corpses on the ground, and the green-edged sword in her hand picked up the Chenkuan bags on their waists. Gathering her strength, she leapt into the air, flipped over the small alleyway, and quickly left. Just as she left, many cultivators rushed into the small alleyway. They had heard the commotion, but when they entered the small alleyway and saw the bloody scene inside, their expressions changed greatly. Some of them could not help but vomit on the spot. Killing people was just a matter of nodding their heads to the ground, but the scene inside was far too bloody, and they could not bear to see it. The three dead people were all martial masters. A bold older cultivator examined the three dead people, and when he found out their ranks, he was extremely shocked. Chapter 72. Over here, the deaths of the three martial masters not only alarmed the surrounding cultivators, but also the town's village constable. However, the village constable was usually only responsible for maintaining order among the townspeople. He had no way of interfering with the affairs of cultivators, not to mention the fact that the dead were martial masters. This made things even more difficult for him. Thus, he could only think of a way to find out the identities of the three martial masters before notifying their clans. However, the news quickly spread throughout the town. After all, the death of three martial masters was no small matter in this town. Fengjiu didn't care about this. After she returned to the courtyard, she entered her space to cultivate. The black market mercenaries in the town seemed to have automatically avoided the mission of hunting her down. The next few days passed peacefully, and the two of them were busy cultivating. Until one day, Guan Shalin, who had gone out to buy food, walked into the courtyard in a daze. "Brother." Fengjiu, who was practicing Tai Chi in the courtyard, saw that something was wrong with him and called out to him, but he didn't respond. "Brother." She called out again, and only then did he suddenly come back to his senses. "Ah, Xiaoju, you called me?" He composed himself and looked at her, forcing a smile. However, he didn't know that his smile was very forced. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" She walked towards him and asked. Guan Shalin lowered his head in silence, not saying anything. "You don't want to tell me?" Then I won't ask. Hearing this, he hurriedly raised his head. No, Xiaoju, it's just. He looked at her for a long time, and his voice was a little bitter. I went out to buy some things, and I heard news from my clan that my cousin is getting married. After knowing each other for so long, she had never asked about his background or his clan. Similarly, he had never asked about her clan. This was the first time she had heard him talk about his family. You want to go back and attend his wedding? His hand involuntarily touched the wound on his waist that had already healed. His voice was a little sad as he said, Xiaoju, do you know? Ever since I was 6 years old, I was raised by my uncle and practiced martial arts with my cousin. Although we were not of the same mother, I have always respected him and regarded him as my blood brother. However, I never thought that he would suddenly attack me from behind. If you hadn't saved me, I think I would have been dead by now. I didn't understand why he wanted to kill me, but when I heard that he was getting married, I realized that it was for her. Her. She was a little stunned. Yes, the woman he married is the third daughter of the Ku family, Ku Xinya. She was the fiancée that my father had arranged for me. Fengzhou's eyes widened when he heard that. He was a little dumbfounded. What the hell was going on? Being assassinated by his cousin and having his fiancée snatched away? She looked at him sympathetically. She felt that her cheap brother was really quite pitiful. Looking at his lonely expression, she asked curiously, Brother, do you like that woman? Guan Shilin shook his head. I don't really like her. It's just that I knew that she would be my woman when she grew up. Now that I heard that she was going to marry someone else, and that that person is my cousin, I feel bad and wronged. Fat. Chapter 73. Xiaoju, I'm feeling terrible right now. It's fine if you don't comfort me, but you're laughing at me. He glared at her with some embarrassment, but the pain in his heart was reduced by a lot because of her laughter. No, I've never seen this side of you before. It's very novel, hey. It was indeed novel. Although he had a handsome face, his body was so sturdy that it could almost be compared to a tiger's waist and a bear's back. This kind of tall and sturdy man had a face full of grievance at this moment, as if he was a resentful woman in her boudoir. How could she not want to laugh? But, where are your parents? Since your father helped you arrange this marriage, they should be against it, right? She was curious. How long had it been since his accident? Did those people really think he was dead? Hearing this, the embarrassment on Guan Shilin's face dissipated, and he looked a little sad. I've never seen my mother since I was born. When I was 6, my father heard about my mother's news and went out to look for her, but he never came back. There was also no news back to the Guan family. Everyone in the family said he was dead. He walked to the stone table and put down the things. But I don't believe it. My father's talent is the best in the Guan family. I don't believe he's dead, so I made a wish when I was young. I must be famous. This way, as long as my father and mother are still alive, they will definitely know about me. Looking at his serious and solemn expression, Fengzhou nodded inwardly. It was no wonder. Although his profound strength cultivation wasn't very high, his explosive power was very strong. The muscles on his 4 limbs were also very developed, so he must have put in a lot of hard work. Brother, I believe you can do it. She patted his shoulder and encouraged him. Cultivate well. Your talent is not low either. In the future, you will definitely surpass your father. As soon as she finished speaking, a faint light flashed through her eyes. She smiled and said, But brother, since your cousin is getting married, you should go back and congratulate him. Otherwise, it won't be right. Ah! He looked at her, puzzled. Ian, that's it. I'll go with you. Anyway, she couldn't stay here any longer. Otherwise, when the Shu family received the news and came looking for trouble, she didn't have the ability to deal with a family yet. Naturally, she had to hide her strength and bide her time. Moreover, she also wanted to go back and take a look at Yunyu City. Go buy a carriage later. I'm going out for a while and will be back soon. She went back to her room and changed into men's clothing. She put on a mask and went out. Guan Shilin was surprised to see her change her clothes and go out, but he didn't ask anything. After eating some food, he also went out to buy a carriage. When Fengjiu arrived at the black market, he saw a black-clothed girl kneeling at the entrance. She glanced at him, only to see a dark face and drooping eyes. She walked in, not paying much attention to the black-clothed girl. However, the black-clothed girl raised her eyes when she walked past her. Her originally proud and dim eyes suddenly lit up, as dazzling as the stars in the night sky as she stared at the red figure walking inside. "You're leaving?" In the side room, Steward Dong's face was filled with anxiety. "But we haven't collected all of those spirit herbs yet." Chapter 74. She never thought that in the end, her medical skills would be the most useful. However, these were only the medicines that she had concocted. If it were the alchemists of this world, thinking of this, a dim light flashed across her eyes and an idea slowly formed in her mind. She looked up at Steward Dong and asked, "I saw a young girl in black kneeling outside. She seems to be the one who drank the medicine that day?" "Yes, that's her. She's been kneeling there for 2 days. Actually, she's just here to see you." "See me?" She raised her eyebrows, a little surprised. "Yes, she's a cultivator with some fame in the black market's battle arena. It's said that she has a younger brother, but his health isn't very good. She used all the money she won from the battles here to treat her brother. However, many doctors have seen her brother and said that he won't live for long." As Steward Dong spoke, he saw that Fengjiu was interested and continued, "2 days ago, I heard that her brother fell into a coma and the doctors in town couldn't do anything about it. For some reason, she knelt there and said that she wanted to see you. We promised you that we wouldn't reveal any information about you, so naturally, we wouldn't answer her. So, she's been kneeling there and can't be chased away." Fengjiu nodded and didn't say much. After a while, she explained the matter of the spirit medicine to him and got up to leave. When he walked out of the black market's main entrance and passed by the young girl in black, Fengjiu paused and glanced at her before walking away. The young girl in black turned to look at the departing figure. Her eyes flashed and she immediately got up to follow him. After walking down 3 streets, Fengjiu's footsteps suddenly stopped, and a mocking voice was heard. "You've been following me for so long. Don't tell me you want to rob me." She turned around as she spoke. A black figure walked out from behind her. It was the black-faced young girl. She looked at the red figure in front of her and pursed her lips as she said, "You have the smell of medicine on you. You're the alchemist who concocted the medicine." Fengjiu smiled and looked at her with his hands around his chest. His lips were slightly curved with a bit of evil. And then, the black-clothed girl looked at Fengjiu in silence. After a long time, she knelt down and lowered her head. "Please save my brother." Her voice was stiff and cold. Although she was kneeling, her back was straight. Obviously, she was not someone who would beg for help. Fengjiu's smile deepened, but he shook his head. "No." As soon as she finished speaking, she turned and walked forward. However, the figure that was originally kneeling appeared 3 steps away from her this time. "Please save my brother." It was still the same stiff voice and the same straight back. When Fengjiu saw this, he thought of her on the stage that day. Her eyes were like a little beast's, stubborn and determined. "Then tell me, why should I save your brother? I can help you kill people." Fengjiu shook his head. "There are professional black market assassins for killing people. I can give you my life." She shook her head again. "I don't need your life." Hearing this, she raised her head and looked straight at the person in front of her. "Then what do you want?" Fengjiu looked her up and down. He shook his head and smiled wickedly. He did not say anything and left. Seeing the figure gradually disappear, the black-clothed girl stood up and shouted, "I can warm your bed." Chapter 75. She turned around in shock and looked at the dark-faced girl. She asked with uncertainty, "What did you say?" The girl pursed her lips and stared at the red figure, "I can warm your bed." When Fengjiu heard this, he resisted the urge to laugh and teased, "I still prefer beauties. Do you think I'd want a dark-faced girl to warm my bed?" Hearing this, the black-clothed girl wiped her face with her sleeve, revealing her original appearance. "I'm not ugly." She looked at Fengjiu and said. Yes, not only was the girl not ugly, she was extremely stunning. She had a naturally beautiful face. Her delicate features paired with her palm-sized face should have made her a lovely and moving beauty. However, she did not have the shyness of a woman. Instead, she was cold and indifferent. However, the cold aura around her gave her the feeling of an ice beauty. In addition to her beautiful face being darkened, her eyebrows and eyes were also modified. Therefore, she did not look very eye-catching. Without looking, it was easy to guess that her flat chest was bound with cloth. Fortunately, she was smart and knew to cover up her beautiful face. Otherwise, just her appearance alone would be enough to attract a lot of trouble. She walked back to the black-clothed girl's side with large strides and looked at her playfully. "You'll really warm my bed? As long as you save my little brother, my life is yours, not to mention this body." She appeared very indifferent, as if she did not care at all. However, her body tensed up when Fengjiu approached, and her hands secretly clenched, told Fengjiu that she was not as indifferent as she appeared to be. That's right, which girl would casually warm someone's bed without care? Would she hand over her life so casually? She looked at her deeply and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. "Lead the way." "Yes." The girl lowered her eyes and responded. Only then did she lead her to her room. 1 hour later. Fengjiu looked at the shabby room in front of him, which looked like it would collapse with a gust of wind. He then looked at the black-clothed girl who opened the door and walked in quickly. He followed her in and saw the youth lying on the wooden bed. The black-clothed girl washed a cloth and wiped his forehead and palms. Then, she looked at Fengjiu. "He is my younger brother. 2 days ago, he took the medicine and vomited blood before fainting." Fengjiu walked forward and saw that the boy was so thin that his chin was sharp and his face was so pale that it was devoid of blood. With just a glance, he reached out and placed his hand on the boy's thin wrist to check his pulse. He withdrew his hand and ordered, "Undo his shirt." As he spoke, he took out a silver needle. The black-clothed girl did as she was told and undid her brother's clothes. She saw her holding a silver needle and casually inserting it into several acupuncture points on his body. The black-clothed girl's heart was slightly raised and she resisted the urge to stop her brother. Her gaze was tightly fixed on her brother, afraid that something unforeseen might happen. After a while, Fengjiu took back the silver needle and stood up. "Carry him and follow me." As he spoke, he turned around and walked out. The black-clothed girl saw this and quickly carried her unconscious brother on her back and followed closely behind him. When Fengjiu arrived at the courtyard, he saw Guan Shilin moving a soft bed onto the carriage. When he saw her return, he happily called out, "Xiaoju, what do you think of this carriage? I especially bought the biggest one. This way, if you want to rest on the road, you can lie down and sleep inside. It will be more comfortable." When he saw the 2 people following behind her, he was a bit surprised and asked, "What are they doing?" Chapter 76. Guan Shilin was stunned when he heard that. Why did he bring 2 people like this back? "Get on." Fengjiu gestured for the girl to carry her brother onto the carriage. "Yes," she replied and walked towards the carriage. Guan Shilin pulled her to the side and asked in a low voice, "Xiaoju, are you planning to bring these 2 with you? That young man doesn't seem to be in good health. Will this work? Could it be that something happened on the way here? Don't worry, it'll be fine. Let's go." Seeing that there was no driver, she asked, "Brother, are you planning to drive the carriage yourself?" "Yes, I'll drive. Don't worry, I can do it with one hand." He smiled and gestured for her to get on the carriage. Hearing him say this, she didn't say anything else and jumped onto the carriage. Guan Shilin also got on the carriage after they got on. He steered the carriage with one hand and headed out of the town gate, heading back to Yunyu City. On the other side, Yunyu City, Shu family. Bang! The middle-aged man on the main seat slammed his hand on the table and stood up in disbelief. He glared at the kneeling guard and said in a cold and shocked voice, "What? What did you say? Say it again." The aura of a superior and a strong cultivator made the kneeling guard turn pale. Cold sweat seeped out of his forehead and he had no choice but to speak again. Reporting to family head, Stone Forest Town's village constable sent someone to report that they found 3 martial master corpses. They suspect that they are from our Shu family. Bang! He fell back in a daze and said in disbelief, "How is this possible? How is this possible? With first elder and fourth elder's strength, how could anyone kill them in a place like Stone Forest Town?" The kneeling guard didn't dare to speak, but his body kept trembling. Who? Who killed them? He stared at the guard with bloodthirsty eyes. What about the two guards? Did they come back? The kneeling guard said in a trembling voice, I don't know who killed him. The two accompanying guards were afraid that the patriarch would punish them and ran away. The first elder, the fourth elder, and the second master were all killed. If the two of them came back, the patriarch's anger would not be easy to bear. Naturally, they took the opportunity to escape while they were outside. Good. Very good. He clenched his fists and said in a cold and bloodthirsty voice, Investigate. Investigate this thoroughly. His Shu family was originally a mid-tier family in Yunyu City. Although they weren't as powerful as the 8 great families, they still had some reputation. But now, in less than a month, his son and brother had been killed. Even the first and fourth elders had been killed. If he couldn't find the culprit, how could he swallow this anger? In a certain courtyard in Yunyu City, Leng Shuang, who was dressed in black and had an outstanding appearance, looked at the figure in white practicing the soft fist technique in the courtyard with a complicated gaze. That day, her brother woke up. That night, she kept her promise and took off all her clothes and laid on her bed. At this moment, she still remembered how she was shocked and didn't know whether to laugh or cry when she lifted the blanket and saw her naked body. It was also then that she found out that she was a girl. Since she didn't want her to warm her bed, why did she help her if she didn't like her beauty? However, no matter what, ever since she gave her life to her, she was her master. This would not change. Chapter 77. Feng Jiu withdrew her fists and looked at the beautiful girl standing on the steps. The more she looked at her, the more she was pleasing to the eye. Leng Shuang came back to her senses and walked towards her. She lowered her head slightly and said respectfully, "Master, young master hasn't returned yet. He went out early in the morning and hasn't returned yet." She said in surprise and asked, "Isn't the marriage between the Guan family and the Ku family 3 days later?" "It's 3 days later," Leng Shuang replied. She paused and said, "But when young master left, he said that he wanted to go back early and didn't want master to follow him. He said that he would handle this matter himself." Hearing this, Feng Jiu smiled. He must be worried that if she went, the situation would not be easy to clean up. Moreover, he still didn't believe that the Guan family would be too cruel to him, let alone that his clansmen would treat him coldly in the face of benefits. This was also good. If she let him handle it himself, he would know that some people would be ruthless in the face of benefits, even if they were clansmen. She didn't have a good impression of his family at all. But the Feng family, thinking of what she learned about the Feng family after coming to Yunyu City, a complicated feeling flashed through her heart. The Feng family really loved Feng Qingge, but they didn't know that Feng Qingge, who was now in the palm of their hands, killed their original daughter. Leng Shuang looked at the messy knife scars on Feng Jiu's face and her eyes flashed. Those knife scars were scattered across her master's face in a disorderly manner. Countless scars covered her original appearance. What could be seen were only those scars that made one's heart tremble. She really couldn't imagine what kind of person would actually ruin a woman's face so thoroughly. What kind of hatred could be used to do such a thing? Thinking of her master who couldn't protect herself, she secretly made up her mind to protect her from now on. The current Leng Shuang naturally did not know Feng Jiu's skills and strength. Ever since she had followed her, she had only seen her practicing this soft and powerless fist technique in the courtyard every morning. On top of that, she was an alchemist herself. Thus, her preconceived notions made her think that she was only proficient in alchemy, and that she was weak in terms of cultivation. Feng Jiu, who was deep in thought, sensed Leng Shuang's gaze. He turned to look at her and asked, "What's wrong?" Leng Shuang shook his head and lowered his head slightly. Seeing this, Feng Jiu seemed to have thought of something. He touched his face and chuckled. "Are you curious about how my face got ruined like this?" Her voice paused for a moment before she said carelessly, "Actually, it looks much better now. In the beginning, even I couldn't bear to look at it." She wasn't worried about the scars on her face. After all, as long as the spiritual medicine was complete, this face could be restored to its original state in less than a month. She was more worried about her cheap brother's hand now. There was news from the black market that the spiritual medicine she wanted was very difficult to find, and it hadn't been found yet. As long as the spiritual medicine wasn't available, his hand wouldn't be able to recover, and she wouldn't be able to let it go. If she really couldn't find the spiritual medicine, then she could only barter with those who had the spiritual medicine. At this time, in the Ku family. Chapter 78. Ku Xinya was startled by Guan Shilin's sudden appearance. They all said that he was dead, and she also thought that he was dead. When she saw him suddenly appear in front of her, she was not happy, but shocked. "Aren't you dead?" She looked at him with a pale face and a trembling voice. Guan Shilin looked at her with a complicated expression. He didn't know why he came here. Perhaps he was unwilling because he had always treated her as his woman. Xiao Ju once asked him if he liked Ku Xinya. He told her that he didn't like her, but he did like her a little. After all, he knew that she would be his woman when she grew up. The way he looked at her and treated her was naturally different from others. However, this person who he had always thought would become his woman was now going to marry someone else. Furthermore, she was going to marry his cousin. This unforeseen event made him feel very uncomfortable. But now, he just wanted to know if she was willing to marry him. Ku Xinya's parents rushed over when they heard the news. When they saw the tall figure in their daughter's yard, their hearts skipped a beat and their faces changed. "Shilin." Guan Shilin turned around and saw the two elders of the Ku family. He said with a sullen face, "I'm here to ask for an explanation." He didn't look at them, but stared at Ku Xinya. His daughter's face was pale and she didn't dare to look at him. Ku Xinya's mother went forward and hugged her daughter tightly. She glared at Guan Shilin with some dissatisfaction. "What are you doing? Your engagement with Xiao Ye has been cancelled. What does it matter to you who Xiao Ye marries?" "Shilin, your engagement was cancelled after the Ku family and the Guan family discussed it. As for the marriage between Xiao Ye and your cousin, the elders of the Guan family also agreed." Ku Xinya's father looked at Guan Shilin and sighed. He was a good seedling, but it was a pity that he had no parents. He couldn't compare to his cousin's status in the Guan family. "Did you also agree?" He still looked at Ku Xinya, stubbornly wanting to know the truth. However, Ku Xinya's mother was annoyed by his repeated questioning of her daughter. "So what if Xiao Ye agreed? Would she lose to you if she was with Guan Shilin? Why don't you take a look at yourself? He has no parents, how can she compare to his status in the Guan family?" Her words were sharp and sarcastic. She continued, "There's no harm in telling you, it'll make you give up. The elders of the Guan family said that in 3 months, Guan Shiwan will definitely win and become the young master. That way, my Xiao Ye will be the young master's wife. In the future, when Shiwan becomes the head of the Guan family, she will be the wife of the Guan family's head. What can she do with you?" After hearing her words, Guan Shilin didn't say anything. He just stared at Ku Xinya, who was being protected by her mother. After a long time, he walked away without saying a word. Ku's father looked at his weak hand hanging by his side and was a little surprised. "Why does his right hand seem to be disabled?" Mother Ku said indifferently, "Why do you care so much about him? Anyway, he has nothing to do with our little YA in the future. I'll go back to my room first." As Ku Xinya spoke, she walked into her room. After closing the door, she walked to the dressing table and sat down. Looking at a wooden hairpin in the jewelry box, she picked it up and threw it into the basket at the corner of the room. "I didn't make the wrong choice. I won't regret it. I definitely won't regret it." Chapter 79. I'm back. Feng Jiu, who was in the courtyard, looked up and saw him angrily return. He couldn't help but ask with a smile, "What's wrong? Who provoked you?" "I went to the Ku family." He walked to the table and poured himself a cup of water. "You went to the Ku family?" She looked at him strangely. "I thought you went back to the Guan family." "I'm not going back to the Guan family. I'll go back in 3 months. I'm going to cultivate in seclusion for the next 3 months. Hearing this, she blinked in surprise. How did you get so agitated after going out for a while? He told her what the Ku family said. In the end, he said, so I've decided. If they want to get married, then let them get married to their heart's content. Anyway, in the family selection in 3 months, I'll definitely defeat Guan Shiwan. I'll let them know that I, Guan Shalin, am not a pushover. He would make them regret it. Not only the Ku family, but also the elders of the Guan family. They all thought that he was inferior to Guan Shiwan, but he would prove to them that Guan Shiwan was inferior to him. Feng Jiu nodded. Yes, I agree. I just sent Leng Shuang to the black market. In 3 months, I'll heal your hand. His heart warmed and he smiled. Xiao Ju, thank you. You're my brother. What's there to thank me for? All right, go back to your room and cultivate. Before your hand recovers, you should learn the cultivation technique well. Then, you'll be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. All right, then I'll go back to my room first. He stood up and went back to his room. The following days were peaceful and busy. Guan Shalin was busy cultivating the cultivation technique. Feng Jiu was also busy cultivating and developing medicine. Because of the busy days, time passed in the blink of an eye. Unknowingly, it had been 2 months since they returned to Yunyu City. Moreover, using the method of bartering, she managed to gather all the medicine she needed in less than a month. In half a month, she also cured her brother's hand. In these 2 months, her reputation in Yunyu City had gradually spread. Even those who had never been to the black market knew that there was a ghost doctor in Yunyu City. Not only was she skilled in medicine, she was also proficient in refining medicine. It's just that the dragon's head and tail are rarely seen. I've only heard of the ghost doctor's name, but never seen the ghost doctor's face. If anyone in the entire Yunyu City knew who the ghost doctor was, without a doubt, the black market was the manager of the black market. However, the black market was not an ordinary force. The black market's influence was spread across many countries. Even the king of the glorious Sun Kingdom could not pry open the black market's mouth to reveal the identity of the ghost doctor. Many forces came to seek an audience with the ghost doctor, but they were all rejected. Even the king of the glorious Sun Kingdom did not manage to meet the ghost doctor. It was also because of this that the ghost doctor's identity became more and more mysterious, making people more and more curious. In the morning, in the courtyard, Feng Jiu was teaching Leng Shuang's younger brother, Leng Hua, Tai Chi when he heard Guan Shalin's joyful voice from afar. Xiao Ju, the peach blossoms in the peach blossom temple have bloomed. Didn't you say you wanted to go and see? I'll go with you today. Feng Jiu slowly retracted his fist and sighed softly. He said to Leng Hua, continue practicing. Then, he looked at Guan Shalin and said, brother, I've already asked Leng Shuang to prepare. We'll leave in a while. But, hey, you don't have to go. Chapter 80. Feng Jiu smiled. How could that be? It's not like you don't know Leng Hua's skills. Besides, don't forget that you have to defeat Guan Shiwan in front of the Guan family in a month's time. How can you not practice? She paused, then continued, besides, I heard that the scenery in Peach Blossom Temple is pretty good. I plan to stay there for a few days before coming back. Stay for a few days? He was stunned, but Peach Blossom Temple doesn't allow people to stay there overnight. Feng Jiu smiled slyly. They don't allow people to stay there overnight, but, look at what this is. She took something out of her space and waved it in front of him. Guan Shalin took it and looked at it. He couldn't help but exclaim, a land deed. A land deed for Peach Blossom Temple? How did you get it? Someone came to the black market to see me last month. I didn't want to bother with it, but I accepted it when I saw that it was Peach Blossom Temple. So, this place will be ours from now on. She smiled and put away the land deed. Since I have some free time now, I'll go take a look. First, I'll admire the peach blossoms, and second, I'll check out the place. If I think it's good, I'll use it as a place for the ghost doctor to stay. Guan Shalin's eyes lit up. Peach Blossom Temple has a lot of peach blossoms. The outer area is filled with all kinds of peach blossoms. Although it's called Peach Blossom Temple, it has nothing to do with a temple. I've seen it once from afar and saw that the pavilions inside were very elegant. I also heard that the peach blossoms in the inner area were transplanted from other places. They bloom all year round and are very beautiful. Hearing this, Fengzhou glanced at him and joked, "Brother, you know quite a lot." Guan Shilin scratched his head and smiled, "I've only been there once with a few friends, so I know a little." Then, he saw that she was still smiling at him, so he waved his hand, "You guys go ahead. I won't go with you. I'll go there next time." "Well, it won't be too late for you and Leng Hua to go there after everything is done." She nodded and looked at Leng Hua, who was practicing Tai Chi behind her, and said, "Come here." After Leng Hua withdrew his hand, he exhaled softly and walked quickly to her side. "Master." Ever since he woke up, his health improved day by day. In the past, he found it difficult to even walk a few steps. Now, he could even learn Tai Chi from his master. Although he also felt that this soft Tai Chi was useless, but his master said that it was good for his body, so he followed and practiced. Looking at the youth who had gained some weight after 2 months of care, Fengzhou smiled and said, "I'll go to the Peach Blossom Temple with your sister. You stay here and take care of your body. Also, keep an eye on my brother and see if he's slacking off." Leng Hua glanced at Guan Shilin beside him and nodded seriously. "Yes, I'll keep an eye on young master. Do I need him to keep an eye on me? It's already good enough that this kid can take care of himself." Guan Shilin muttered in a low voice. Fengzhou didn't mind and continued, "Also, you have to practice Tai Chi sooner or later." "Okay," he replied again. At this time, Leng Shuang, who was dressed in tight black clothes, came in. Seeing that they were all in the courtyard, he came to Fengzhou's side and said, "Master, the carriage is ready." "Well, I'll go change my clothes and then leave," she said and walked towards her room. Leng Shuang looked at her younger brother, his gaze softening as he said in a gentle voice, "I'll go out with master. You take care of yourself at home." Chapter 81. Hearing this, Guan Shilin also nodded and said, "Yes, you're right. You must take good care of her, especially don't let those perverts get close to Xiao Ju." The more he thought about it, the more worried he became. Actually, I should go with her. Unfortunately, Xiao Ju didn't let him go, and he had to stay at home to practice. Leng Shuang saw his worried look and said, "Young master, don't worry. I'll take care of her." Then, he said a few more words to Leng Hua, then went to the door to wait for Fengzhou to come out. Not long after, Fengzhou, who had changed into a red dress, stepped out with Leng Shuang. After getting into the carriage, she said to the 2 people who saw her to the door, "We're leaving. You can go back. Be careful on the road," Guan Shilin said. In fact, it was only about 4 hours by carriage from here to Peach Blossom Temple, but he acted as if they were going very far, repeatedly reminding them like an old mother. Fengzhou lowered the curtain of the carriage, and Leng Shuang, who was sitting outside, asked the coachman to drive away to Peach Blossom Temple. At the same time, Feng Manor, WNU Courtyard. "Ge, are you done? Yishuan has been waiting for you outside for most of the day." General Feng, who was dressed in black and had a tall and sturdy body, was pacing back and forth outside, looking at the closed door from time to time. When he saw the door open and his precious daughter come out, he hurried over. "What do you want me to say to you? Since Ruoyun left, you haven't even added a maid to stay by your side. How can you do everything by yourself? You're my daughter, Feng Xiao. You don't have to do anything. There will be servants to take care of you properly. Listen to me. Later, find a maid to stay by your side. If it doesn't work, I'll get one from the phone guards for you." Feng Chinga's eyes were filled with smiles as a trace of coquettishness appeared on her beautiful face as she reached out to hold his hand. "Father, you don't have to worry about it. This is a small matter. I can do it myself. Besides, I am the daughter of General Wei Wu. If I let others take care of me for everything, won't others say that I am too weak?" When Feng Xiao heard this, his thick, sword-like eyebrows immediately stood up. He glared at them and said, "Who dares to say it? If anyone dares to say anything, I'll teach them a lesson." He paused for a moment before continuing, Daughters are meant to be pampered. What's more, I only have you as my precious daughter. If I don't dote on you, who will I dote on? All right. Let's talk about this later. All right, let's go to the front hall. Don't let Brother Murong wait for too long. She pulled him towards the front hall. You also know that you've made him wait for a long time? Then I'll hurry back and find another maid. She can help you with some things and save you a lot of time. He warned her. Although his expression was rough and his face was dignified, his gaze was full of doting. Yes. I'll listen to you. I'll look for one later. I'll definitely look for one. She repeatedly agreed. Feng Xiao nodded in satisfaction and smiled. That's more like it. In the front hall, Murong Yixian was holding a teacup as he looked at the tea in his cup. He was a little distracted. During this period of time, he kept thinking about the red-clothed woman he met in Stone Forest Town. Not for anything else, but for that inexplicable sense of familiarity. He once suspected that Chinga had been swapped, but he found out that she knew everything that only the two of them knew. Chapter 82. Just as he was thinking about it, he heard laughter coming from outside. He looked up and saw her holding Feng Xiao's arm as they walked in. The intimacy between father and daughter was natural. That expression and intimacy couldn't be faked. Moreover, if it really was a fake, how could Feng Xiao, as her father and her closest relative, not be able to detect it? In fact, he didn't know that for Feng Xiao, Feng Chinga was his daughter, his closest relative. Even if he suspected anyone, he wouldn't suspect his own daughter. Even if he noticed that something was different from before, he wouldn't think that his daughter had been replaced because such a thing was too inconceivable. Moreover, his daughter was good no matter how he looked at her. No matter what she did or what she became, in his heart, she was still his daughter and shouldn't be suspected. Brother Murong. Feng Chinga let go of Feng Xiao's hand and trotted to his side. She looked at him with joy and adoration. You've been waiting for a long time, haven't you? Putting away the distracting thoughts in his heart, he put down the teacup in his hand and stood up, revealing a gentle smile. No, I haven't been here for long. He looked at Feng Xiao who walked in, bowed and called out, Uncle Xiao. In the Feng family, he wasn't the third prince, but the future son-in-law of the Feng family. He was Murong Yixuan whom they had watched grow up. Therefore, he bowed as a junior. Ha, Yixuan. It's rare that you have time to take this girl out. With you accompanying her, I'm relieved. Feng Xiao laughed loudly and said, Peach Blossom Temple is a 2-hour journey from here. This girl has been here for so long, it's getting late. You should set off quickly. Don't go there, it's already noon. Dad, you really don't want to go with us? Anyway, you have nothing to do at home, why don't we go together? I can accompany you to enjoy the peach blossoms and the scenery of Peach Blossom Temple. She hugged Feng Xiao's arm and swung it gently, her tone was coquettish. Hearing this, Feng Xiao laughed loudly. Ha, no, with Yixuan accompanying you, I'll be in the way. You two go and have fun, there's no hurry to come back. He looked at Murong Yixuan and said, Yixuan, please take care of this girl. The more he looked at his future son-in-law, the more satisfied he was. The two of them had known each other since childhood and were in love with each other. Now, they were just waiting for an auspicious day to hold the wedding. Uncle Xiao, don't worry. I will take good care of Chinga. He looked at the bashful Feng Chinga and a smile appeared on his face, concealing the strange feeling in his heart. Feng Xiao sent the two into the carriage. Only after watching the carriage leave did he enter the Feng Manor. On the other side, at the Peach Blossom Temple, Feng Jiu followed the path to the inner area of the Peach Blossom Temple. The more he looked at the scenery, the more satisfied he was. Such a place was undoubtedly the best place to live. Not only was it suitable for cultivation, but it was also suitable for mental cultivation. The Peach Blossom Nunnery was located in a forest south of Yunyu City. The entire forest was filled with peach blossoms of all colors, and there was no end in sight. The Peach Blossom Nunnery was located in the depths of the Peach Blossom Forest. It was a place as beautiful as a fairyland, but outsiders were not allowed to set foot in it. Even so, when the peach blossoms bloomed in March every year, it still attracted many tourists to Peach Mountain to admire the flowers. They also wanted to see the peach blossom nunnery in the depths of the peach blossom forest. Now, the peach blossom nunnery had fallen into her hands. Chapter 83. Yes. Without any questions or doubts, Lung Shuang respectfully replied before returning to pass the message to the blackguards. Once the blackguards received the order, they immediately carried it out. This was Elder Yang's order. They were to unconditionally obey that person's arrangements without the slightest bit of disrespect. Once the order to seal the mountain had been issued, the tourists who had come to admire the flowers on the mountain were naturally chased away. After all, the Peach Blossom Nunnery was a private property. If the owner was willing to let them enter the Peach Blossom Forest to admire the flowers, they could only leave. Because it was still early and there weren't many people in the Peach Blossom Forest, it took less than an hour for the tourists to be chased out of the Peach Blossom Nunnery's territory. At this moment, Fengjiu arrived at a courtyard in the Peach Blossom Nunnery and saw an old man in grey sweeping the courtyard. She stopped and asked, "The servants have all left. Why are you still here?" The old man in grey held the broom and turned around. He looked at the red figure standing under the peach blossom tree in the courtyard with his hands behind his back and said, "I've been sweeping here for more than 10 years. I can't bear to leave." Hearing this, Fengjiu smiled. Her gaze fell upon the old man in grey and an unreadable light flashed through her eyes. "Since you can't bear to leave, then you can continue to stay." The old man in grey was startled. He glanced at her and continued to sweep the ground, not saying anything else. Fengjiu didn't seem to care and turned to leave. After she left, the old man in grey stopped sweeping and glanced in the direction she had left. He then turned away and continued to sweep the ground. When Murong Yi-Xian accompanied Feng Qingge to the Peach Blossom Nunnery, he found out that the new owner of the Peach Blossom Nunnery had ordered the mountain to be sealed for 3 days. When he saw this, he looked at Feng Qingge and said, "We've come at the wrong time. The mountain will be sealed for 3 days. We can only come back 3 days later." Because the mountain was sealed, she was a little unhappy. "Will you still come back with me 3 days later? What if you say you're busy?" Hearing this, he smiled and said gently, "I won't. Since I've promised you, I'll definitely do it." "That won't do. Since we're already here, even if we can't enter the mountain, we can still walk around, okay?" As she spoke, she hugged his arm and said, "Big brother Murong, just walk with me." "Very well." He nodded his head and agreed. Hearing this, Feng Qingge's face lit up with joy and she happily said, "Brother Murong, you're the best." Murong Yi-Xian smiled but didn't say much. He just walked slowly with her and looked at the mountain scenery. Perhaps it was because she sensed his coldness, Feng Qingge's heart was a little worried. She suddenly stopped in her tracks and looked at the person beside her. She gently bit her lower lip and asked in an aggrieved tone, "Big brother Murong, do you not like me anymore?" Murong Yishuan was slightly surprised. "Why do you say that? Recently, I feel that you seem to be indifferent to me. You don't seem to like being with me." She glanced at him and lowered her eyes. "You weren't like this in the past. Do you not like me anymore?" "Silly girl, why would I?" He smiled and rubbed her head. "I'm just worried." "Ah." She looked up at him in confusion. Chapter 84. Hearing this, Feng Qingge finally relaxed and a smile appeared on her face again. "Since we're already here, don't think about anything else. The scenery of Peach Mountain is so beautiful, it's a good chance to relax." "Yes," he replied with a smile and walked with her on the mountain path. 3 days was enough for Fengjiu to reorganize Peach Blossom Nunnery. First, she changed Peach Blossom Nunnery to Peach Blossom Cove and used what she had learned to set up arrays around Peach Blossom Cove to separate the inner and outer areas. This way, she wouldn't have to worry about people from the outside accidentally entering Peach Blossom Cove and disturbing her peace. The Peach Blossom Forest could be enjoyed by tourists. However, she set up a rule that people had to pay to enter the forest. There was no one else in Peach Blossom Cove. Other than Fengjiu and Lung Shuang, there was only the old man who was sweeping the ground. Peach Blossom Mountain was surrounded and only one entrance was left. The people guarding the entrance to collect money were the blackguards from the black market. 3 days later, when many tourists came to Peach Blossom Mountain again, they were shocked to find out that they had to pay to enter the Peach Blossom Forest. You have to pay to enter the forest to enjoy the flowers? What kind of rule is this? That's right, we didn't have to pay before. Isn't such a big peach blossom forest open to the public? Why do they have to pay? Some people glared angrily at the blackguards who were guarding the entrance. They felt that it was unreasonable for them to take money and couldn't accept it at all. Some people expressed their understanding. After all, the Peach Blossom Forest was private property. It was reasonable for them to pay to enter other people's private property. If they put themselves in other people's shoes, they wouldn't allow people to enter and enjoy the scenery for no reason. The blackguards wouldn't explain the reason so kindly. One of them glanced at the people who were complaining and said in a low voice, "If you want to enter, pay up. If you don't want to spend money, then stay on the side." After being scolded, those people naturally wouldn't admit that they didn't want to spend money. Thus, they all took out their money with red faces and entered the Peach Blossom Forest angrily. Not far away, Feng Qingge held Murong Yishen's hand and looked at the scene in front of her. She said with some confusion, "Has Peach Blossom Nunnery changed owners? Didn't they say that this place was private property and not for sale? Who has such great ability to buy this place?" Murong Yishen's gaze fell on the words Cove of Peach Blossom Cove. His eyes brightened and he couldn't help but praise, "Beautiful words." The Peach Blossom Cove of Peach Blossom Cove was the new owner of Peach Blossom Cove of Peach Blossom Cove, of course, the new owner of Peach Blossom Cove of Peach Blossom Cove's new owner. Furthermore, according to the news, the new owner of the Peach Blossom Cove was the mysterious ghost doctor who he had only heard of recently. Hearing his heartfelt praise, Feng Qingge followed his gaze and indeed saw the 3 words Peach Blossom Cove written in bold and flamboyant calligraphy. Even though she wasn't very good at calligraphy, she couldn't help but admit that the 3 words were written very well. "Let's go. TTTS. SS Hisses to see. En." Feng Qingge responded and walked forward beside him. In the Peach Blossom Cove of Peach Blossom Cove, Fengjiu was sitting under a peach blossom tree, brewing tea and admiring the flowers. Leng Shuang stood guard not far away. Chapter 85. Leng Shuang. Mistress. Leng Shuang walked over from behind. "Go back and tell my brother that I'll go back when he goes back to the Guan family for the election. Tell him not to be distracted and focus on cultivating. Leng Hua can stay there to accompany him for now. We'll come back together when the time comes." "Yes," she responded, but didn't take a step forward. She hesitated for a moment before asking, "Mistress, if I go back, won't you have no one to protect you?" Hearing this, Fengjiu couldn't help but chuckle. She raised her eyebrows and looked at her with ridicule. "Do you think your mistress is so weak that she can't stand up to the wind and needs someone to protect her?" Without waiting for her reply, she waved her hand and said, "Go. You don't need to worry here." In the past 3 days, she had entered the space to cultivate every night. Her strength had improved rapidly, but she had hidden her cultivation so that no one could detect it. After all, her identity as a ghost doctor and alchemist was already in the limelight. If people knew that her strength had improved by leaps and bounds, some people would feel threatened. Moreover, she had an ancient mythical beast in her space. Even if it was still in its infancy, it couldn't be underestimated. After Leng Shuang left, Fengjiu lazily got up and walked out of the Peach Blossom House with light steps. She wasn't dressed as a man in red. Her loose hair was tied up with red silk. She wasn't wearing shoes, so her red dress couldn't cover her delicate snow-white feet. Step by step, she lightly stepped on the curved and smooth stone path, revealing her delicate toes with alluring red nail polish from under her red dress. Unknowingly, she had walked far away. She could faintly hear the melodious sound of a zither coming from outside. "Tchem." Her eyes turned and a trace of surprise flashed through her eyes. Then, she took out a red veil from her sleeve to cover her face. She tapped her toes and shuttled through the peach blossoms like a fairy. Soon, she was out of the maze array. The red figure leaped up and sat on a peach blossom branch that was in full bloom. Her snow-white and delicate feet dangled in the air, swaying leisurely. She appeared to be very leisurely. She lazily leaned against the peach tree branch behind her and reached out to pluck off a peach blossom to play with. Hearing the sound of the zither not far away, the corners of her lips under the veil couldn't help but curl up slightly. The melody of the goddess of Luo was quiet and elegant, like pearls falling on a jade plate, tinkling and crisp. It was also like a mountain stream, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, thin and long. She didn't think that such a famous zither song would exist in this magical world of cultivation. Su Ruoyun, I haven't even gone to look for you. Why do you keep coming to me? She murmured in a low voice. A faint light flashed through her half-squinted beautiful eyes, and a strange smile appeared in her eyes. Just as she was about to leap forward, she suddenly felt a gaze that she couldn't ignore fall on her. She tilted her head slightly and pushed aside the peach blossoms to look over. With this look, a smile couldn't help but appear in her eyes. As the radiance flowed, the smile spread out like a dazzling star, unknowingly mesmerizing. It's her. Murong Yixuan stared at her in a daze. His eyes were filled with surprise and nervousness that even he himself didn't notice. He looked at the red figure sitting like a fairy among the peach blossoms. He looked at her pair of snow-white delicate little feet swaying mischievously in the air. He looked at her head that popped out from behind the peach blossoms and the moving smile in her eyes that seemed to be able to speak. Chapter 86. Big Brother Murong? What are you doing here? Hearing the voice behind him, he came back to his senses and instinctively turned his head to look in the direction of the voice. Qingji? Why are you here? As soon as his voice fell, he seemed to remember something and turned his head to look at the peach blossom tree. That fairy-like woman had already disappeared, as if what happened before was just an illusion. Looking at the petals being swayed by the breeze and sprinkling down a mesmerizing rain of flowers, there was a faint and indescribable sense of loss in his heart. You still have the nerve to say that. I originally wanted to play the zither for you, who knew that you would run here to admire the flowers. She followed his gaze and looked over, only to see the petals falling with the wind and sprinkling all over the ground. The red and white peach blossoms here are very mesmerizing. I couldn't help but become infatuated. He said gently with a faint smile on his face, obviously a little absent-minded. Just as she was about to say that the peach blossoms around here were all the same, Feng Qingji's expression suddenly changed and she asked, Big Brother Murong, do you smell any fragrance? Fragrance. The air is filled with the fragrance of peach blossoms. That's not right. She shook her head. There seems to be another kind of smell. As she spoke, she suddenly heard a buzzing sound. Looking towards the source of the sound, she saw a large swarm of black bees not far away heading towards them. Her expression immediately changed and she couldn't help but cry out in alarm. Bees. When Murong Yixuan saw the large swarm of bees, his expression also changed slightly. Soon after, he pulled her hand and ran. The swarm of thousands of bees wasn't something that they could chase away with just one or two pairs of hands. However, even if there were bees gathering nectar here, there shouldn't be so many bees swarming towards them all of a sudden. Ah! Feng Qingji cried out in pain. She only felt her hand being stung and immediately after, 10 bees fell on her body, scaring her so much that she fiercely slapped herself. Go away. Quickly go away. Seeing that the bees surrounding them only stung her, Murong Yixuan was stunned for a moment. He hurriedly took off his outer robe and threw it towards her, but before he could touch her, he heard her cry out in alarm. She fiercely slapped herself and jumped back a few steps to avoid the bees that were chasing after them. Big Brother Murong. Big Brother Murong, so many bees stung me, ah! She shouted as she ran, and the bees followed closely behind her. Especially when she passed through a place with more tourists in front of her, the tourists were so shocked that they covered their heads and squatted down to scream, only to find that the bees were only chasing after Feng Qingge. Did she touch something? Why did it attract so many bees? When she came here earlier, there was a fragrance on her body. Maybe she put on too much powder. After being stung by so many bees, his face is probably swollen like a pig's head. The surrounding wanderers, regardless of whether they were men or women, all looked on with folded arms as Feng Qingge ran all over the peach forest. Some of the women even looked at her with gloating eyes. Everyone watched as the swarm of bees chased after her relentlessly. Some of the faster ones even stung her face, causing her to scream. When they thought of the pain on their bodies couldn't help but tense up. Ah! Murong Gij! Murong Gij, save me! At this moment, Murong Yixuan was also a little stunned by this sudden scene. For a moment, he was also at a loss of what to do. Chapter 87. Hiss. Everyone sucked in a breath and looked at the scene in disbelief. Murong Yixuan came back to his senses and saw that the bees hovered above and buzzed for a while before finally leaving. He hurriedly came forward and pulled her out of the water, wrapping her in his jacket. Chinga, how are you? Murong Yixuan was a little flustered. Seeing that her hands and face were swollen, he couldn't help but feel distressed and guilty. Before leaving, he promised Uncle Xiao that he would protect her, but now she was chased and stung by the bees and had nowhere to hide. She had jumped into the pool and was in a sorry state. Feng Chinga didn't say anything and only lowered her head, her body trembling slightly. Someone was targeting her. It was that fragrance. Who was it? Who was targeting her? Thinking about how she had been chased by the bees all over the peach forest and how she had jumped into the water to avoid them, she was so angry that her whole body trembled. Murong Yixuan thought that she was shivering because she was drenched from head to toe, so he hurriedly picked her up and quickly headed in the direction of the carriage. Seeing Murong Yixuan carrying Feng Chinga away, the surrounding tourists who were admiring the flowers began to whisper. No one noticed that on a peach tree not far away, a red figure was lying on the branches of a peach tree with a smile on her face. The next moment, her figure flashed like a flower fairy in the peach forest and instantly disappeared among the peach blossoms. Returning to the inner area, she took off her veil and happily hummed a little tune. Stepping on the pebbles under her feet, she lightly leaped. When she reached the inner area, she saw the old man sweeping the ground again. She stopped, glanced at him, and continued to step on the pebbles. When the red figure walked inside, the old man who was sweeping the ground raised his head and glanced at her. His eyes moved slightly, but his expression didn't change as he continued to sweep the ground with his head lowered. Lung Shuang came back at noon as if he was worried about leaving her alone in the Peach Blossom Cove. Therefore, he rushed back almost as soon as he passed on the news. Feng Jiu threw her a book of sword skills and told her to practice diligently. He moved some herbs and closed the door. Sometimes, he would close the door for an entire day and didn't even come out to eat. The days in the Peach Blossom Cove passed peacefully and comfortably. Feng Jiu was sometimes fiddling with medicinal herbs and sometimes cultivating. His days were busy but fulfilling. No one knew that her cultivation had reached the mid-stage of the Black Realm in less than a month after she arrived at the Peach Blossom Dock. Others had spent 10 years or even longer to reach this realm, but she had only used less than a month to raise her cultivation level by a few levels. At this moment, she didn't know that in the courtyard where Guan Shalin and Leng Hua were staying, a massacre had broken the peace that had been maintained. Who are you people? Why did you barge into my compound? Guan Shalin, who was only wearing a white undershirt, held a sword in his hand and stared straight at the men in black who had forced their way into the courtyard. The barrier in the courtyard was broken by these people, and because of this, they woke up the people who were sleeping soundly. Leng Hua hurriedly put on his clothes and came out. When he saw the men in black outside with long swords in their hands, he was shocked. After all, he had never faced such a situation before. At this moment, seeing the men in black surrounding them and pointing their bloodthirsty long swords at them, he was naturally shocked. A figure in a black robe walked out from behind with his hands behind his back. He stared at Guan Shalin with his malicious eyes and sneered sinisterly. You killed members of the Shu family. Do you think you can escape? Chapter 88. So it's the head of the Shu family. Hearing the middle-aged man's words, Guan Shalin finally remembered who he was. Like the Guan family, the Shu family could only be considered a mid-tier family in Yunyu City. However, the Shu family and the Guan family did not have much interaction, and he had never seen the head of the Shu family before. However, the only Shu family in Yunyu City that could be ranked was the Shu family. The head of the Shu family said that she killed your people? Could it be that there's some misunderstanding? Even though he said that, his heart was racing fast. He guessed that this matter must have something to do with Xiao Ju, but he could not admit to it now. As for the grey-robed elder, he was even more puzzled. He had never seen that person before, but he was able to break Xiao Ju's array. He should not be a simple person. Thinking of this, he approached Leng Hua behind him and said in a low voice, "Find a chance to escape. Don't let them catch you." Although Leng Hua was a little flustered, he calmed down. During this period of time, his body had already recuperated, and his physique had also improved. However, he had never cultivated before, so there was no way he could fight with these people. If he stayed behind, he was afraid that he would only distract the young master. It was better for him to escape and find a way to inform his master and sister. Thinking of this, he retreated slightly. Misunderstanding? Ha 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 ha. What a misunderstanding. The Shu family patriarch laughed out loud, but his laughter suddenly stopped. He stared at him with a gloomy and bloodthirsty gaze. "My son, my second brother, and 2 of my Shu family's elders all died in the hands of that stinky girl. Do you think that a misunderstanding can be resolved? You're too naive." Indeed. Guan Shilin's heart skipped a beat. It was indeed Xiao Ju who killed the Shu family. However, when did this happen? Why didn't he know? Where's that brat? Hurry up and tell her to come out and die. Master Shu shouted in a deep voice. He glanced around and saw that there was only one other person in the courtyard besides Guan Shilin and a young man with no cultivation. "Shu family head, we have an agreement. Once you catch her, don't kill her." This old man still wants to ask where she learned her array formation from. The grey-robed old man's voice was deep, as if he was targeting Fengjiu's array formation. "I will definitely fulfill my promise to you. Right now, it's more important to find out where that damned girl is." With that, he gestured, "Capture them. Run." Guan Shilin shouted and pushed Leng Hua back, while he blocked the attack for him. Clang. Swish. The sound of swords clashing against each other rang out clearly in the night, and a sharp aura flashed past. Guan Shilin blocked the attacks of the black-robed men with his sword, trying to buy Leng Hua more time to escape. However, he wasn't Fengjiu after all. Although his battle strength had increased, he was obviously not a match for the people that the head of the Shu family had carefully selected. Moreover, he was fighting against 10 people at the same time. In a short while, his white inner robe was stained with blood. However, it was still difficult for the black-robed men to take him down without killing him. Hence, the head of the Shu family, who had been watching for a while, shouted in a deep voice. "You're all trash." He flew out, his palm containing a strong dark force aura. Bang! Fart! Chapter 89. At this moment, a black-clothed guard quickly walked to his side. "Master, we've searched inside and out, but we didn't find anyone else. Only that young man escaped to the back, but 2 of our brothers have already gone after him." At the same time, Leng Hua, who had escaped from the back door, was blocked by 2 black-clothed guards. When the 2 black-clothed guards saw that Leng Hua was just an ordinary person with no cultivation base, they didn't think much of him. "You can't escape. Be a good boy and give yourself up." As he spoke, one of the black-clothed guards leaned forward and grabbed his wrist, intending to drag him back to the front. However, just as he was about to grab the young man's hand was grabbed instead. Caught off guard, he was pulled and pushed, crashing into another black-clothed guard. Hiss. "What the hell are you doing?" The other guard was hit on the head and couldn't help but curse angrily. He pushed the man away, and when he saw the young man taking the opportunity to escape, he was furious. He turned the sharp sword in his hand, and a sword aura flew out. "You're courting death." "Ah!" Leng Hua cried out in pain and staggered. He felt a burning pain on his back, and a warm liquid flowed down his back, causing his face to turn pale. However, he didn't stop and continued to run forward. Suddenly, a black figure leaped up and easily overtook him to block his path. "Run! Why aren't you running? If I can't even catch you, won't I become a joke when I return?" The black-clothed guard sneered and attacked again with his sword, aiming to stab the young man's left leg. However, the young man who was still in front of him flashed and dodged his attack. Before he could even react, The young man's hand that was holding the sword was grabbed by the young man's hand and slashed towards his neck. Hiss. Ah! The black-clothed guard only had time to gasp in disbelief before he saw the sword in the young man's hand slash towards his neck. It was so fast that the other guard couldn't stop it in time. Bang! There was a heavy thud. The black-clothed guard fell to the ground, his eyes filled with unwillingness. Blood gushed out from the cut on his throat, quickly dyeing the ground red. Lung Hua seemed to be frightened by his own instinctive reaction. He had never cultivated before and had only learned Tai Chi from his master. During this period of time, he had been practicing Tai Chi in the morning and in the evening. The technique of Tai Chi was deeply ingrained in his bones. When danger came, he instinctively used Tai Chi to protect himself. He knew that if he didn't kill the other black-clothed man, he wouldn't be able to escape. Thus, he gave up on running away and turned to look at the black-clothed guard who had a stunned expression. He slowly squatted down and raised his hands slightly as he chanted the Tai Chi incantation in his heart. Following the direction of his head, he loosened his shoulders and restrained the chi under his ribs to support his body. What the hell? When the black-clothed guard saw that his companion had been killed, the brat actually stopped running away and even began to use soft fist techniques. He immediately raised his sword and attacked. As for the front speak, where did that damned girl hide? He stomped on Guan Shilin's chest, causing blood to flow from his mouth again. He grunted and didn't speak, only glaring angrily at the guard. Take him back. I don't believe that I can't pry open his mouth. Chapter 90. At this moment, a guard in black hurriedly ran over. Family head, 2 of our brothers have been killed. That young man escaped. What? He was killed by someone without any cultivation? His voice was slightly raised and filled with anger as he strode towards the back door. As expected, he saw the 2 guards lying motionless on the ground. One had his neck slit, while the other had his chest pierced by a sword. Seeing this, his face darkened as he clenched his fists. Very good. I didn't think that a kid with no cultivation would have the ability to kill my men. The old man who followed behind stroked his beard thoughtfully. He clearly had no cultivation, but he could kill people with cultivation. Furthermore, there was even an array master here. It seemed like that girl had secrets on her. Thinking of this, a ray of light flashed across his narrowed eyes. What's the relationship between the captured man and the girl? The old man asked Family Head Shu. Hearing this, Family Head Shu turned around and said, that man was a disciple of the Guan family in Yunyu City. However, I heard that he died in Jofu Forest a while ago. I'm guessing that the girl saved him. The 2 of them had a good relationship and seemed to call each other brother and sister. So if she knew that the man was captured, she would definitely appear. Yes. Patriarch Shu nodded his head. Only then did his expression soften. It's good that the young man has escaped. If he escapes, he will find that woman and tell her that he has been captured. I don't believe that she won't come when Guan Shilin is in my hand. The old man frowned and asked in a low voice, if the Guan family knew that he was in your hands, would they do anything? Why would they? This Guan Shilin was abandoned by the Guan family. His fiancée was even taken away by his cousin. Why would someone abandoned by the family care about his life? That's good. Before that girl is lured out, he can't die or cause any trouble, the old man said in a low voice. Hearing this, Family Head Shu's heart skipped a beat. He looked at the old man suspiciously. Senior, you're already an array master. Why would you be interested in a little girl's array? The old man glanced at him and his face darkened. Patriarch Shu shouldn't be curious about this old man's affairs. You should know that the more people know, the faster they will die. Family Head Shu didn't dare to ask any more questions. After all, the old man's status wasn't someone he could offend. On the other side, Lung Hua, who had escaped, hid in an alley and gasped for breath. His body was covered in blood, some of it was his, and some of it was the guard he had killed. This was the first time he had killed someone. Previously, the situation was critical and he did not think much about it. However, at this moment, his body was trembling slightly with lingering fear. He was unable to calm down. After hiding in the alley for a while, He saw that there was no movement in the surroundings. Those people didn't chase after him. He gritted his teeth and supported himself against the wall to get to his feet. Taking advantage of the night, he went to Peach Blossom Cove. He knew that his master's other identity was the ghost doctor. He also had connections with the black market, but he couldn't go to the black market now. In the past, it was his sister who went to the black market. Not to mention that those people didn't know him. Even if he did go, he was afraid that things would get out of hand and his master's identity would be exposed. Chapter 91. Dawn was about to break, but the sky was still grey. The few blackguards who were guarding the forest were chatting as they patrolled the mountain. When they came to the front, they saw a figure stumbling towards them. They looked at each other and quickly stepped forward and shouted, "Who is it?" Lung Hua forced his heavy body to walk forward step by step. His body swayed slightly as he fell and got up again. The wound on his back seemed to have coagulated. He could no longer feel it. His feet were very heavy, and every step was very strenuous. His vision gradually blurred. When he saw the person patrolling the night, his feet swayed and he fell again. He stretched out his hand and opened his dry throat. Take me to see Lung Shuang. She is my sister." His voice was very weak, but the blackguards still heard him clearly. Lung Shuang's little brother? A trace of surprise flashed through their eyes. One of them went forward to check the wound, and the other quickly rushed inside. Whether it was true or not, they had to inform Lung Shuang first. "Who did you say it was?" "My little brother." Lung Shuang, who heard the ring of the array, came out to check. When he heard the blackguard captain's words, his heart jumped. "Where is he now? Where is he? Take me to see him. Ahua should be in the courtyard with the young master. Why would he be here? Could it be that something had happened?" When Leng Shuang hurried over and saw Lung Hua covered in blood, his face changed greatly. His light blue clothes were stained with blood. His heart trembled. "Ahua," she called out in a trembling voice. She wanted to go forward and support him, but she didn't know how to do it. She could only shout, "Quick! Take him in." The blackguard captain and the other blackguard who were supporting Lung Hua followed behind Lung Shuang. When they arrived at the peach array, the two thought that maybe this time, they could go in and take a look. Unexpectedly, Lung Shuang stopped in front of them. "Give him to me." She stepped forward and carefully supported Lung Hua from the hands of the two blackguards. She took Lung Hua and walked step by step into the peach array. Soon, the two figures disappeared into the peach array. "What's the mystery behind it? We've been guarding here for almost a month, but we haven't even been able to go inside. Thinking about it, I really can't accept it." The blackguard muttered softly. He was very curious about that place, especially about the person who lived there. The leader of the blackguards looked inside thoughtfully. He then looked at the blackguard and said in a deep voice, "You have been a blackguard for a long time. You should know our rules. Don't ask about things you shouldn't know and don't be curious. Otherwise, it won't do you any good." "Yes." After being reprimanded by the captain, the blackguard hurriedly responded and lowered his head. As for inside, Lung Shuang brought the unconscious Lung Hua to his room. He first checked his wounds and bandaged them. Then, he quickly went to Fengjiu's room and knocked on the door. "Master, master." Her voice was a little anxious and panicky. Fengjiu, who was sleeping soundly in the room, opened his eyes when he heard the sound. He put on a coat and opened the door. "What's wrong?" Her voice was still sleepy, but her eyes were no longer sleepy. She knew that if it wasn't something urgent, Lung Shuang wouldn't knock on the door before dawn. "Master, Ahua is here. His body is covered in blood and is unconscious. I'm afraid something happened to the young master." Chapter 92. Lung Shuang placed him in his room. As soon as they entered, Fengjiu smelled the thick scent of blood in the air. She came to the bedside and saw that Lung Hua's upper garment had been taken off. He was half lying on his stomach, his pale face slightly turned to the side. Seeing the long sword mark on his back, Fengjiu's eyes darkened. She reached out to check his pulse. Lung Shuang, who was next to her, couldn't hide the worry in his eyes. He said, "Ahua's back injury is more serious. The wounds on the front of his body are only scratches. When I helped him in, the blood on his wounds had already coagulated. I couldn't wake him up no matter what." After Fengjiu checked his pulse, her eyes fell on his feet. She saw that his boots hadn't been taken off, but his toes were bleeding and had a few small holes. Her hand reached into her sleeve and 2 fingers took out a brown pill and stuffed it into Leng Hua's mouth. She then handed a bottle of medicine to Leng Shuang. She said, "Take off his boots and clean the wounds on his feet." "Yes." Leng Shuang hurriedly took the medicine she handed over. She carefully took off Leng Hua's boots. When she saw the scraped skin and bleeding feet, she felt her eyes heat up. She couldn't stop the tears from falling. Seeing this, Fengjiu slowly said, "The wounds on his back are not shallow. Fortunately, his blood has coagulated. Otherwise, the blood would have dried up in 8 hours. As for the wounds on his feet, they are only superficial wounds. After applying medicine, they will be fine in 2 days. There won't be any danger." She was more worried about her cheap brother. Leng Hua was unconscious. She didn't know what had happened. After hearing her words, Leng Shuang's worried heart finally relaxed. When she finished bandaging her brother's wounds, she found that her master was no longer in the room. She got up and walked out. Seeing her standing in the courtyard, she asked, "Master, do you want me to go back and ask around?" Fengjiu shook his head. "No need. Let's wait for Leng Hua to wake up. No one knows better than him what happened last night. Master, don't worry. Young master will be fine." "Okay." She nodded and said, "Let me know when Leng Hua wakes up." Then she walked back into the room. After entering the room, she flashed into the space. With a flip of her hand, a pill appeared in her palm. This was a pill that could help her increase her Xian Qi cultivation. However, this was her first time developing it, so she didn't know how strong this pill would be. Would there be other reactions? As a result, she had never consumed it even though it had been developed. The little fire phoenix in the space saw her staring at the pill in her hand, not knowing what she was thinking. She walked up to her with her short legs and asked in a soft and curious voice, "What's wrong?" "I want to reach the peak of the Black Realm as a martial master," she said in a low voice as she held the pill in her hand. Little Fire Phoenix's eyes widened when he heard this. "You're crazy. You're only at the 3rd level of the middle stage of the Black Realm as a martial master. The higher your cultivation, the more you can advance. If you want to reach the peak of the Black Realm, it will take you at least half a year even with this spiritual house of space. If you have an accident now, your cultivation will be destroyed. If it's serious, you won't even be able to keep your life." Seeing that she didn't respond at all and was staring at the pill in her hand, he hurriedly said, "There's more. Profound energy and martial skills are indispensable. If you keep raising your profound energy, if you can't comprehend the essence of your martial skills, it's useless even if you have profound energy cultivation. Do you know that? Guan Shalin is in danger." Chapter 93. Even so, you can't gamble with your life. The little fire phoenix glared at her, his chubby cheeks puffed up in anger. "If something happens to you during your breakthrough, who's going to save him? Even though I can defeat a peak martial master with my current level of cultivation, I'm worried that if the opponent is stronger than me, it'll be an irreversible situation." She paused for a moment, deep in thought. "Furthermore, I've set up a formation in the courtyard. Only a formation master can break it. So even if Leng Hua hasn't woken up and told me everything, I know that this isn't a simple matter. The enemy I'm about to face is very powerful." All right. You don't have to take that medicine. If you really can't handle it, I'll help you at most." Fengjiu's gaze fell on the little boy. He didn't hide his suspicions. "Little guy, even though you're the ancient fire phoenix, you're still a child. Furthermore, you look like a 3-year-old human child. If even I can't handle it, what can you do?" All right. She just felt that this chubby little boy with short arms and legs didn't have much fighting power. After all, he wasn't an adult yet, was he? If she really met a strong opponent that even she couldn't handle, she didn't believe that he would be able to help her. However, The little fire phoenix wasn't happy when he heard this. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and sat down on the ground. He glared at her angrily. "Don't look down on me. I'm not as useless as a 3-year-old human child. I'm very strong," he emphasized again, even though Fengjiu didn't take his words seriously. "Master, who is awake?" Leng Shuang's voice came from outside. Fengjiu looked at the pill in his hand. He thought for a moment, then put it away. He said, "Be good and stay here to cultivate." Then, he flashed out of the space. When he opened the door, he saw Leng Shuang's face full of joy. "Master, who is awake?" "Okay." She nodded and walked towards Leng Shuang's room. When she entered the room, she saw that Leng Hua had already opened his eyes. When he saw her, he wanted to get up, but she stopped him. "You're injured. Just lie down." "Master, young master has been captured." His voice was still very weak, but it was much better than before. "Do you know who those people are?" She thought to herself. It would be fine if they were only captured, as long as they weren't killed. That middle-aged man said that he's from the Shu family. He said that master killed his son, second brother, and 2 elders. He wants to settle the score with master. Upon hearing this, Leng Shuang was slightly surprised. "Master killed someone? How could this be?" Master's strength could only be considered as an embroidered pillow at best. How could he possibly kill an elder of the clan? When Fengjiu heard this, his eyes flashed. He suddenly understood. So it was the Shu family. The Shu family's second master and the others were all killed by her, so how did they know that she was the one who killed them? Could it be that they found her portrait on the black market and guessed it? Did they bring someone who knows how to set up arrays? How did you manage to escape from there? Tell me everything in detail. The Shu family head brought a grey-robed elder over. He was the one who broke the array. As for me. Chapter 94. At that time, I reacted instinctively. If master had not taught me the Tai Chi fist, I would have died under their swords. Thinking of this, he felt a sense of lingering fear. After all, in the past, he had always been protected by his sister. His body was weak and he was bedridden all year round. He would never have dared to imagine what would have happened that night. However, after that night, a strong idea formed in his heart. I want to cultivate too. Even if I can't compare to his sister, I want to cultivate. This way, he won't have to be protected by anyone. Furthermore, if anything happens, he can protect them. After hearing his words, Leng Shuang couldn't help but look at her master. Her heart was filled with disbelief. Her master's Tai Chi fist could actually defeat the enemy. She had always thought that her master's Tai Chi fist was just a warm-up exercise. She never thought that it would be her Tai Chi fist that saved Ahua's life. After hearing his words, she nodded and said, "Focus on recuperating. Don't think about anything else." She then turned and walked out. Leng Shuang followed her out. Seeing her standing in the courtyard, she asked, "Master, what should we do next?" "I'm going back for a while. You take care of things here." "Master, you want to save the young master alone?" She was startled. She then asked worriedly, "Even the young master is no match for those people. If you go, won't you walk right into their trap?" She didn't say those words out loud. From her point of view, even if her master's Tai Chi fist was very skillful, she would never be a match for the clan head. Furthermore, she was only one person while the other party was an entire clan. Not to mention the disparity in their strength, the difference in their numbers was too great. How could she send her to her death? That's not something you should worry about. Just do what I've asked you to do. She turned and returned to her room. She changed into men's clothes and put on the devil's snare flower golden mask. Her entire aura seemed to have changed. It was a sharp and languid aura. It was as dangerous and mysterious as the king of the night. The aura that she had been holding back and hiding was released at this moment. It was impossible to ignore. She left the courtyard and rushed out of the forest. Her profound energy surged and her footsteps changed strangely. She was as fast as a ghost and disappeared without a trace. In the Shu family dungeon. Whoosh. Pa. Yes. The whipping sounds were accompanied by whooshing sounds, as the whips were accompanied by muffled groans. The thick stench of blood filled the dark and damp dungeon. On the wooden cross, Guanshelin was tied up with wounds all over his body. The whip marks on his body were stacked on top of each other. Blood mixed with sweat dripped down his tattered clothes. Ever since he was captured, he had been whipped non-stop. He was so exhausted that he couldn't even scream. It was as if his entire body didn't belong to him. He was in so much pain that he couldn't feel anything. He couldn't even lift his head. However, the person wielding the whip didn't show any mercy. He cursed and lashed out at him. "How dare you kill my son? How dare you kill my second brother? Who asked you to kill two of my elders? Who asked you to become enemies with my Shu clan?" When the guard at the side saw that Guanshelin was on the verge of death and had fainted, he couldn't help but cautiously say, "Family head, he has fainted." Chapter 95. The guard's heart trembled when he heard this, but he still hurriedly agreed. He walked to the back and took the red-hot soldering iron, carefully handing it to the family head. "I'd like to see how hard your bones are," family head Shu said in a low voice. The soldering iron in his hand was about to brand Guanshelin's body. The red-hot soldering iron was still giving off steam, and even the guard at the side did not dare to look at it. "Stop!" A voice filled with pressure rang out, causing the Shu family head who was about to place the branding iron to stop. He frowned slightly and looked at the person who had come. The grey-robed old man walked in and smelled the stench of blood in the dungeon as well as the unconscious Guanshelin. He frowned and his face darkened as he stared at the Shu family head with an unhappy expression. "This person is still useful. If you kill him, who else am I going to look for if that girl doesn't come?" Hearing this, family head Shu did not say anything. He only handed the soldering iron to the guard at the side. "Senior, don't worry. That brat will definitely come. Even if she didn't come, he would flip the entire Yunyu city upside down to find her." Night fell, but the Shu residence was still as bright as day. There were teams of guards patrolling inside and outside, setting up an inescapable net just to catch the prey that might come tonight. Fengjiu, who had been hiding in the dark and observing for an entire day, suddenly saw a familiar black figure. She frowned and her red figure flashed, flying towards that figure. Leng Shuang was about to jump onto the wall of the Shu residence when suddenly, a hand clasped her shoulder and the other covered her mouth, pulling her into a dark corner. She was about to fight back when she heard a familiar voice in a low voice. "It's me." As she spoke, Fengjiu released her hand. She frowned and looked at her. "Didn't I ask you to look after the Peach Blossom Cove? Why are you here?" "Master." Leng Shuang's eyes lit up. "I was worried about you, so I followed you." She was still a little worried about saving someone herself, so after instructing Ahua to take care of herself, she followed along. "Nonsense." Her voice was low. "If I hadn't stopped you, you would have ruined my plans tonight." Leng Shuang lowered his head and said, "I'm sorry, Master. Let's go back now." Hearing this, she suddenly raised her head and stubbornly shook it. "I'm not going back. I want to help Master save young Master. If you go in, you might just die." She looked at her firmly. "Leng Shuang's life is Master's. Even if I die, Leng Shuang will not let Master take the risk alone." Hearing this, Fengjiu looked at her deeply. After a long time, he looked away. "Since you're not afraid of death, then follow me." "Yes." She was overjoyed and her eyes lit up. Fengjiu took her and quietly leaped onto the wall behind the door. Hiding in the dark, she could see at a glance that the outer circle of the Shu residence had been set up with an array formation. If she wanted to enter, she had to go through that array formation. "There's a formation inside. Follow me closely and don't make a single mistake." With that, he jumped down and led Leng Shuang into the formation. Inside the Shu residence, in a courtyard, Master Shu sipped his tea and asked worriedly, "Senior, can that formation really trap people? Could it be that we don't even know she's here?" "It can't be." Chapter 96. However, at this time, the two of them didn't know that the person they were talking about had already walked out of the array unscathed. As soon as they walked out of the array, they encountered a night patrol. Before Leng Shuang could dodge, Fengjiu pulled him to the other side. Their figures flashed by as fast as lightning, so the night patrol didn't notice them at all. After standing still, Leng Shuang was slightly stunned. He looked at his master with disbelief in his eyes. Even if he practiced for another 10 years, he still wouldn't be able to match that kind of movement. "Let's go," Fengjiu whispered and led him to the other side. Along the way, although they met the Shu family's night patrol, the two of them avoided them and didn't disturb them. Leng Shuang finally understood the meaning of his master's words. The outer circle was an array, but the inner circle was full of night patrol. If she had come in alone, she would have been discovered long ago. "Wait here." After Fengjiu said this, he quietly rushed out and grabbed the last night patrol guard, covering his mouth, and pulled him into a dark corner. After the night patrol guard was far away, Fengjiu asked in a low voice, "Where is Guan Shilin?" The guard's eyes widened in horror, and there was a pleading look in his eyes. He pointed in a direction and kicked his feet, trying to escape. Seeing this, Fengjiu's gaze turned cold. She broke his neck with one hand, dragged him to a dark corner, and threw him there. The two of them left again and searched in that direction. They avoided the night patrol guards when they met them. Fengjiu didn't stop until they came to a rockery inside. Leng Shuang looked at her questioningly, not understanding why she suddenly stopped. Fengjiu's eyes swept over everything in front of her. She saw 4 guards guarding a rockery in the distance. In addition, there were many people hiding in the dark. She was deep in thought. She knew that she couldn't get rid of the people in the open and in the dark in an instant, so she could only use medicine. With a flip of her hand, she took out a medicine bottle from her space. She quietly snuck to the windy area and sprinkled the medicine in her hand with the help of the night wind. Then, she waited quietly. Only when all the people in the dark and in the open had collapsed did she signal Leng Shuang to come out. "You guard here. I'll go in and take a look." As soon as he finished speaking, he opened the stone door and walked in. As soon as she entered, a dark and damp smell hit her in the face. The thick smell of blood made her frown. Especially when she saw the badly mutilated person tied to the wooden stake, her heart tightened, and a murderous aura overflowed from her body. "Brother," she called out to him in a low voice, but he was already unconscious. Seeing this, she quickly stuffed a pill into his mouth, cut the rope, untied him, and brought him out. "I'll lure them away. You find a chance to bring him out first." Leng Shuang, who was supporting Guan Shilin, nodded and said worriedly, "Master, be careful." "Millimeter, let's go." She responded and watched them go to the other side. Only then did her gaze fall on the main courtyard of the inner residence. Her eyes were filled with a cold, murderous aura, and she spoke in a low voice. "I'll let you know what kind of people you can't mess with. Fire! Fire! Put out the fire!" Shu family head and the old man who were still talking in the courtyard heard the sound of the fire being put out outside. They immediately stood up. "What's going on?" A guard rushed in with a hurried expression. "Family head, it's not good. There are many places in the residence on fire. The fire is very fierce, and it's going to spread here." Chapter 97. However, when they arrived outside, the Shu family head almost fainted when he saw the situation. The Shu family residence was large, and there were at least 100 guards. However, all of them were lying on the ground, and no one knew if they were dead or alive. Only 2 elders and 4 martial master captains were left. On top of the wall, a red figure looked down from above. Her red robes fluttered in the night wind, and the Golden Devil's snare mask looked mysterious and strange under the light of the flames. However, when he saw the Golden Devil's snare mask and the red robes, the Shu family head paled. You're the ghost doctor." The ghost doctor. He was a mysterious and awe-inspiring person. No one knew if he was a man or a woman, but they knew that he always wore a flamboyant red robe and a golden mask with a blooming datura flower on it. All the big families in Yunyu City wanted to meet him, but they were rejected. The king of the country of Glorious Sun wanted to meet him, but he was also rejected. The black market forces in various countries respected him and treated him as an important guest. It was rumored that he had medical skills that could bring the dead back to life. It was rumored that a bottle of medicine from him could increase a cultivator's power instantly. It was rumored that, there were many rumors, but this person who was only a legend to them had actually come to the Shu clan today. Moreover, he had appeared here in such a manner. How could he not feel a chill in his heart? She was someone that even the black market forces wanted to protect. If that force found out, the Shu family would have no place in Yunyu City. However, at the same time that his heart trembled, a crazy thought also floated in his mind. Kill her. As long as she was dead, the black market forces would not know that he had touched her. As long as she was dead, the Shu family would not have to worry about the black market forces taking revenge on them. Kill her. Kill her. He suddenly came back to his senses and shouted loudly. His finger pointed at the red figure standing high up in the sky, and his voice was sinister and filled with madness and viciousness. You must not let her leave this place alive. The grey-robed elder frowned and glanced at the Shu family head. When his gaze landed on the red figure, his eyes were filled with excitement and anticipation. No. I want her alive. The two elders quickly came to the patriarch's side. Their robes were slightly burned by the fire. Because they had escaped from the fire, their hair was messy, and their faces were stained. At this moment, they looked somewhat miserable. Master, there's a bewitching pill in the fire. Everyone below the level of a martial master has been drugged. Kill her. The head of the Shu clan spoke word by word in a gloomy voice. He ordered the 4 martial masters to kill the red figure together. At the same time, he swept his gaze towards the grey-robed old man beside him and questioned him angrily. Didn't you say that she can't walk out of your formation? Didn't you say that you would know once she came in? She set fire to my Shu residence's 100-year-old foundation. Today, if I don't make her head fall to the ground and spill her blood over the Shu residence, I swear I won't rest. Pu. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood and was sent flying by the palm strike. He crashed heavily into the corner of the wall and fell into the flames. Before he could even cry out, he heard a loud boom and the entire wall collapsed, burying the patriarch of the Shu family. Chapter 98. The two elders cried out in alarm. The 4 captains of the martial masters were also shocked. They looked at the old man in grey who had suddenly attacked. The old man narrowed his eyes. His whole body was overflowing with a bloodthirsty aura. His disdainful and cold voice slowly came out of his mouth. Who do you think you are? How dare you question me? His malicious gaze swept over the 2 elders beside him. Their hearts trembled and they involuntarily took 2 steps back. One palm killed the family leader who was at the peak of the martial master level. With just 1 palm, their patriarch didn't even have the chance to stand up and died in his hand. In the raging fire, under the pile of rocks, the family leader of the Shu family, who had been established for hundreds of years, died in such a sullen and unexpected way. Fengjiu, who was standing on the high ground, raised his eyebrows under his mask. A trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. Weren't these 2 in cahoots? They actually killed the family leader of the Shu family? Killed with 1 palm, her gaze fell on the old man in grey. She saw a visible dark force aura condensing in his palm. A great martial master. This old man in grey was a great martial master who was above the martial master level. Well, to be able to kill a peak martial master with 1 palm, his strength was naturally much higher than the family leader of the Shu family. But, a great martial master, right now, she should have no problem dealing with the family leader of the Shu family. But to deal with a great martial master who seemed to be above the initial stage of the Black Realm, it was obvious that she was no match for him even if there were 2 of her. Go, catch her for me. Remember, I want her alive. The grey-robed elder stood there without moving. His hands were folded in his sleeves as he quietly stood below. His eyes were filled with excitement and anticipation as he looked at the bewitching and dazzling red figure. His gaze was so strange that it made one's hair stand on end. Yes, yes. Whether it was the 2 elders or the 4 captains of the martial masters, even if they saw the family leader killed, they would not dare to avenge him. They knew that the old man's strength was far above theirs. If they did not obey, they would be the next to die. Seeing the people surrounding her, Her eyes flashed. She took out a dagger and held it in a reverse grip. Then, she leaped and landed on a roof not far away. Those people chased after her. They didn't have any weapons in their hands, as if they were afraid of the old man and didn't dare to use their weapons against her. However, they didn't know that this would only give her an easier chance to kill them. "Where do you think you're going?" An elder shouted and extended his hand to grab Fengjiu's shoulder. His surging profound energy aura, as well as the pressure of a martial master, attacked at this moment. Originally, he wanted to shock her so that he could capture her, but unexpectedly, his hand was grabbed and twisted behind his back. Her ghost-like movements, as well as her crafty and strange methods, made it impossible for him to avoid falling into her hands. Before he could dodge, a cold dagger was already pressed against his neck. When the others saw this, their hearts froze. Some were shocked, and some were in disbelief. They were well aware of the third elder's power, but now, she had managed to hold him back so easily. He even fell into her hands, and his life and death were in her hands. Don't kill me." The third elder was a little frightened. He couldn't believe it. In the blink of an eye, the scene that he had imagined had happened, and he was the one who was at a disadvantage. It's too late. Chapter 99. Third Brother. Second Elder exclaimed in a trembling voice. Seeing Third Elder, who was as close as a brother, slit his throat, the fresh blood that gushed out pierced his heart and burned his eyes. He clenched his fists tightly and his knuckles cracked. The hatred in his heart boiled in his chest like boiling lava that was about to burst out of his chest. The patriarch was dead and he was the only one left out of the 4 elders. The Shu family was also burning in flames, and without any accidents, it would eventually turn into ruins. The Shu family had declined, and all of this was caused by the person in front of him. He wanted to kill her. Only by killing her could he vent his anger. Only by killing her could he pay tribute to the 134 people in the Shu family. Swoosh! A cold light flashed and a long sword flashed from his sleeve. The sharp tip of the sword pointed diagonally to the ground. His gloomy and murderous gaze stared fixedly at the red figure. His entire body's profound energy aura gathered together with his murderous aura as it diffused out. He had stimulated all of his strength in order to fight to the death. The moment they saw that the third elder had been killed, the 4 captains' bodies tensed up. They instinctively wanted to run away. However, just as they were about to run, several silver needles shot out and pierced the back of their necks. The 4 of them only let out a muffled groan. Their bodies stiffened and they fell powerlessly into the fire. Hiss! Ah! Blood-curdling screams rang out from the fire. The 4 of them rolled in the fire and struggled to stand up and escape. However, in the end, they were still mercilessly swallowed by the fire. "This old man swears in the name of the Shu family's elders. Even if I die, I will drag you down with me." The second elder's gloomy and ghastly voice sounded out. Profound energy surged as the tip of his sword shot out a shocking sword aura. That sword aura that was visible to the naked eye was like a venomous snake that assaulted her with a force that was too late to cover her ears. Its speed was swift, the sword move was ruthless, and it carried a ruthless determination to kill her. Seeing this, Fengjiu did not dare to be careless. He poured profound energy into the dagger in his hand and their auras counteracted each other. When the blade and sword clashed, the sound of clashing metal rang out from time to time. A sharp air current also filled the air between the two, whistling loudly. Below, the grey-robed old man's gaze could not help but darken when he saw the second elder's ruthless and fatal attacks. He stared at the 2 people above with displeasure. That woman was of great use to him, and he couldn't let her die just like that. However, when they saw that the woman was able to withstand so many attacks from the second elder without suffering any injuries, they couldn't help but look at her with some surprise. After all, as far as he was concerned, since she had dabbled in formations and medicine, she would definitely not be able to take care of both her battle prowess and cultivation. However, he did not expect that she would bring him surprises again and again. That's right, it was an accident. He originally thought that she wouldn't be able to break the array he had set up. As long as she entered the array, she would definitely be trapped. However, she was able to calmly walk out of the array without alerting him. It was obvious that her cultivation in array formations was much higher than he had imagined. Moreover, he was even more certain that on her body, there must be some ancient books on array formations that he had never studied before. Thinking of this, his eyes suddenly brightened. Ancient records of formations. He didn't expect to encounter such a good thing in a small ninth-grade country. Since he had encountered it, he definitely wouldn't let it go. Together with this woman, he wanted her as well. Chapter 100. Ah! A cry of pain was heard as the long sword in Second Elder's hand was sent flying by a kick. The long sword streaked across the air and fell into the flames below. Because he had been kicked, the web between his thumb and forefinger felt numb, as if the bones in his wrist had been broken. He was in so much pain that he could not lift his hand and could only hang limply. Trembling slightly, he looked at the red figure in front of him with a pale face. That figure looked even more dazzling against the backdrop of the flames below. Her ink-black hair was blown by the night breeze, as if a pair of hands were gently caressing her hair in the night sky. A bewitching datura flower bloomed on her golden mask, making her look even more mysterious and strange. Her body was filled with a bloodthirsty and austere aura. It was very strong, so strong that it made him tremble with fear. That's right, if the other party was an ordinary person, the few elders would not have fallen into her hands one by one. Even the master had lost the entire Shu family because of her. Thinking of this, he gritted his teeth and sent the profound energy in his body into his dantian. In an instant, his entire body was like a balloon that had been filled with air as it rapidly swelled up. Even the robes on his body were torn apart by the swelling, revealing his originally emaciated body. However, at this moment, that emaciated body was rapidly swelling up. The explosion of the airflow caused all the veins under his skin to float up. They were clearly visible and looked as if they were about to explode at any time. I've said it before, even if I die, I'll drag you down with me, Second Elder shouted crazily. His head of grayish-white hair fluttered chaotically in the airflow around his body. He spread his arms wide and madly rushed towards Fengjiu in front of him. That speed was twice as fast as when he had exchanged blows with Fengjiu previously. When the grey-robed elder below saw that Second Elder was about to self-destruct to take the woman down with him, his expression changed greatly. He shouted in a flustered and exasperated manner, "Damn it! I said I want her alive. Alive!" Stomping his feet on the ground, the grey figure instantly shot up. His speed was actually several times faster than the Second Elder, who was about to explode and die from the explosion of his profound energy. Fengjiu had been on guard against the Second Elder ever since he revealed a crazed expression, so when she saw him detonate his profound energy with the intention of perishing together with her, she was shocked. She never thought that the Second Elder would actually go to such an extent for the sake of the Shu family. Immediately, she quickly retreated, step by step, trying to escape as quickly as possible. After all, the self-destruction of a peak martial master was no joke. She didn't want to accidentally lose her life. However, just as she was retreating, a grey figure shot towards her like a ghost. She could not even see his figure clearly. All she saw was the grey-robed figure kicking the Second Elder who was charging towards her into the sky. "Ah! I can't accept this." Bang! Boom! The Second Elder's resentful voice reverberated in the night sky. Before his voice even landed, there was a loud explosion. The Second Elder's body exploded in mid-air with a loud bang. The soaring flames and the loud explosion broke the silence of the night. Almost everyone in Yunyu City was awakened in that instant. Chapter 101. Don't be afraid, I'll treat you well. When Fengjiu heard these words coming from the grey-robed old man's mouth, she only felt a wave of disgust as goosebumps appeared all over her body. Even the corners of her mouth couldn't help but twitch. Especially when this old man was actually using a pair of excited and strange eyes to stare at her. That kind of disgust could be imagined. She cast a glance at him and rubbed the goosebumps on her arms with both hands as she bluntly said, "Old thing, when you're talking, why don't you take a mirror and look at your old face that's like a shriveled orange? You're already a person with one foot in the coffin, yet you're still so shameless." Those mocking words caused the grey-robed old man's gaze to darken. Even the smile on his face disappeared as he stared at her with a malicious aura emitting from his entire body. This old man took you in as a cultivation vessel because I think highly of you. Cultivation vessel? Fengjiu let out a strange cry as she impolitely sized him up from bottom to top. She then ridiculed, I couldn't tell that an old thing like you was also a pervert. But you're already so old, can you still use that plaything? Impudent. He flew into a rage out of humiliation as his chest heaved up and down due to his anger. His eyes widened as he glared at her. In the next moment, the grey-robed figure swept out as fast as lightning as his withered hand turned into a claw and grabbed towards Fengjiu. Fengjiu's expression instantly changed as a fierce aura shot out. She didn't avoid it but met it head-on. Her half-narrowed eyes carried a ruthless and bloodthirsty aura as her strange footwork moved her figure. The dagger in her hand turned as she stabbed towards the grey-robed old man with profound energy. Insignificant skill, the grey-robed old man sneered. With a flip of his hand, he easily dodged Fengjiu's attack. When he blocked her dagger with one hand, he used the other hand to grab her. Fengjiu's hand was clasped by the grey-robed old man, so she immediately borrowed the strength of the force and jumped down. As she escaped from the old man's tightly clasped fingers, she raised her leg to block the attack. Only the sound of her leg carrying the aura of profound energy sweeping through the air could be heard. The old man's calf was kicked when he wasn't paying attention. His knee bent, and when he squatted down, he quickly jumped back and retreated away from Fengjiu's side. Fengjiu didn't stop and attacked again. She knew that the explosion of the second elder's body in the air had already alerted the various forces in Yunyu City. Those people would definitely rush over here. And now, she had to deal with this old man before those people arrived. Hiss. As soon as the old man regained his balance, he saw a cold dagger coming at his neck. He was so shocked that he leaned back and raised his leg to kick. Unexpectedly, the woman suddenly retreated. The dagger that was originally aimed at his neck turned and stabbed into the calf that he kicked. The force of the ruthless stab and the force of the kick almost collided with each other, piercing through his leg. He could only hear the sound of the sharp blade piercing through his flesh. The pain in his spine caused all the strength in his body to burst out. Ah! A strong Wu Zong aura suddenly shot out from his body. The vigorous profound energy that surged out violently sent Fengjiu flying. Fart! Fengjiu, who was thrown a few meters away, felt a sharp pain in her chest. She spat out a mouthful of blood from her heart. Her heart meridian was damaged, causing her entire aura to become weak. Seeing the old man pull out the dagger and throw it into the flames and walk towards her step by step, she narrowed her eyes. She endured the pain in her heart and stood up, facing the wind. She raised her hand and formed a complicated and ancient seal with the blood at the corner of her mouth. At this moment, her cold voice seemed to come from ancient times, melodious and mysterious. With my blood, I break your shackles. Chapter 102. As her voice fell, a ray of light shot out from her hands. It was like a blood-red light that shot up into the sky in an instant. It was also like a dazzling scarlet flame that soared up and lit up the entire night sky. Hiss! A phoenix cry that seemed to have come from ancient times rang out in the night sky. The powerful aura in the voice formed a visible airflow that suddenly spread outwards. The strong aura and airflow caused the entire Yunyu city's ground to tremble slightly. It was as if an earth dragon had turned over, causing everyone to be terrified. When the people who were rushing towards the flames heard the deafening phoenix cry, they all stopped in their tracks in shock. They looked in disbelief at the scarlet figure that soared into the sky and lit up the entire night sky with raging flames. The visual shock went straight to their souls and set off waves in their hearts that couldn't be calmed down for a long time. That's a phoenix. That's the ancient mythical beast, Fire Phoenix. An ancient mythical beast actually appeared here? Who is it? Who owns an ancient mythical beast? Everyone exclaimed in disbelief. Their minds and eyes were filled with the dazzling figure of the Fire Phoenix in the night sky. Previously, they heard that a mythical beast had appeared in the 9 Volts forest. However, they only saw its shadow in the sky and didn't see its real body. At that time, It even attracted cultivators from other countries to come and snatch it. They didn't expect that this ancient mythical beast, Fire Phoenix, would still end up in their glorious Sun Kingdom. Looking at the Fire Phoenix that was flapping its wings and burning with flames in the sky, they only felt their blood boiling. It was actually the true body of the ancient Fire Phoenix. In a small 9th-class country like theirs, they actually had the chance to see an ancient mythical beast. How could they not be excited? In the crowd, Murong Xian, who was rushing towards the flames, also looked at the flaming figure in the night sky in shock. The ancient mythical beast, the king of all birds, the true body of the phoenix was so dazzling and beautiful. It was simply too unbelievable. Although his heart was surging with excitement, he did not stay for too long. Instead, he swiftly returned to his senses and flew towards the flames. On the roof of the Shu mansion, the grey-robed elder could not even stand up under the powerful and thick ancient pressure. His legs trembled as he fell to the ground. He looked at the Fire Phoenix spreading its wings and soaring in the sky in disbelief. His eyes were crimson red, and he was unwilling to believe it. No. This isn't real. How can you possess the ancient divine beast, the Fire Phoenix? How is this possible? Under the powerful ancient pressure, he shouldn't even be able to speak. However, he forcefully broke through the ancient pressure. The moment he opened his mouth, his heart and meridians were all damaged. Blood flowed from one side of his mouth, but he was still madly unwilling to believe this cruel reality. The prey that was already in his bag suddenly flew away and brought him such a strong and unacceptable shock. How could he accept this? Fengjiu, who was standing against the wind, coldly looked down at the old man who had fallen to the ground in a sorry state. Her cold voice slowly rang out, "Dying under the Fire Phoenix isn't a loss for you." Just as her voice fell, the Fire Phoenix in the sky swooped down with raging flames. It spread open its wings of flames and wrapped the old man up before flying into the sky once again. No. Chapter 103. When Murong Xian leaped over the rooftops and arrived at a rooftop not far from the Shu family, he saw the shocking scene. He couldn't help but stare blankly and absent-mindedly at the extremely beautiful and shocking scene. On the rooftop of the Shu family, the red figure stood against the wind. The dazzling red robes seemed so unbridled and demonic in the flames. The fluttering black hair, the raging flames, and the huge Fire Phoenix hovering above his head. Everything seemed so mysterious, so beautiful, so unreal. Perhaps sensing his gaze, that person turned around. The Golden Devil's snare flower mask was clearly reflected in his eyes under the illumination of the flames. He couldn't help but have the urge to take off his mask and see his true appearance. However, before he could return to his senses, he saw the Fire Phoenix in the night sky let out a low cry. As it swooped down, it turned into a ray of light and entered the body of the mysterious person standing against the wind, disappearing. Almost at the same time, that person withdrew his gaze from him. Taking a few leaps, his figure flitted through the flames like a ghost, quickly disappearing into the night. He couldn't help but take a step forward, reaching out to call out to that person. However, in the end, he retracted his hand and didn't call out. Who was that person? He thought. He could vaguely guess. Dazzling red robes, mysterious and demonic aura, unbridled and unbridled momentum, and that Golden Devil's snare flower mask. Who else could it be but the mysterious ghost doctor? When the various family heads who rushed over saw the Shu family surrounded by flames, they couldn't help but gasp. They couldn't believe that a mid-sized family had fallen just like that. Hiss. This is the Shu family. Heavens! Has the Shu family been annihilated? How did the Shu family provoke the master of the ancient mythical beast? To end up with the entire family being annihilated. The crowd discussed as they watched the entire Shu family being surrounded by crackling flames, sighing endlessly. They had an indescribably complicated feeling in their hearts towards a family that had fallen just like that and disappeared from Yu City. This was a world where the strong ruled. This was the unchanging truth of this world. Even if you were from one of the 100 clans, if you provoked someone powerful, it would only take a few minutes for you to be wiped out. Even if your entire clan was wiped out, it would only take one night. A clan head saw that Murong Xian, who had arrived first, was looking in a direction absent-mindedly. His eyes couldn't help but flash as he stepped forward and asked, "Third Prince, you were the first to arrive here. Did you see who it was?" Hearing this, the other family heads who were talking also looked at Murong Yishuan. "That's right. Then who was the one who annihilated the Shu clan? Then who was the person who owned the ancient mythological beast Fire Phoenix?" Murong Yishuan came back to his senses and saw that they were all looking at him with questioning gazes. He pondered for a moment and said, "I only saw a red figure. As for who it was, I couldn't see clearly." Red figure? Everyone's heart skipped a beat, and they couldn't help but think of a person. Ghost Doctor. Chapter 104. 2 days later, in Peach Blossom Cove. Fengjiu, dressed in white casual clothes, walked out of her room and was greeted by Leng Shuang. "Master." Leng Shuang looked at her worriedly. Ever since she came back that day, her master's face had been very pale. "Is my brother awake?" She looked at Leng Shuang and asked, her voice still weak. That night, her heart had been injured. If she hadn't been proficient in medicine, she wouldn't have been able to get out of bed in the past 2 days. However, even though her injuries had improved, she hadn't fully recovered. Even when she spoke loudly or coughed, she would still feel a dull pain. "Young master is awake. Millimeter, I'll go take a look," she said as she walked out. Guan Shilin's courtyard was next to hers, so it was convenient for her to walk around. Therefore, it was only a few steps away from the courtyard. She entered the courtyard, but before she pushed the door open, she heard coughing coming from inside. She stopped and looked at Leng Shuang. Did he drink his medicine? He drank it when he woke up. Hearing this, Fengjiu walked in. When she entered, she saw that he was about to sit up on the bed. She quickly walked forward. "You're still injured. Lie down." "Xiaoju." Guan Shilin saw her and smiled. But when he saw her pale face, he couldn't help but be startled. "Xiaoju, why do you look so pale?" He had just woken up and hadn't had time to ask them how he got here. "You injured your heart. You'll be fine after a few days of rest." She sat down by the bed and reached out to check his pulse as she said, "Although you have many injuries, most of them are superficial. Fortunately, none of your muscles or bones were injured. Otherwise, you'd need to rest for at least 10 days to half a month." Seeing her pale face and thinking that he had been rescued, no matter how slow he was, he knew that she must have saved him. His eyes couldn't help but warm. "Xiaoju, I'm so useless. I always cause you trouble. What are you talking about?" She pulled the blanket over him and said, "You'll be able to get out of bed and walk around after 2 days of rest. However, the Guan family's election is in 3 days, so time is a little tight. I'm worried that your body won't be able to take it." "It's okay, I can do it. I will definitely go back to the Guan family's election. Then you should rest well for the next 2 days. I will prescribe medicine for you so that you can recover as soon as possible." She stood up and said, "I will go back to my room first. If there is anything you need, just tell Leng Shuang." "All right, you should rest more if you're not feeling well. You don't have to come and see me all the time." Fengjiu smiled and nodded. He looked at Leng Shuang and told him to change the dressing. Finally, he returned to his room and entered the space spiritual abode. That night, not only was her heart damaged, even Fire Phoenix fell into a deep sleep. Fire Phoenix, who appeared in the form of a human child, had to wait until he reached adulthood if he wanted to reveal his true form. However, last night, she used the ancient mark and blood to break through the bindings, allowing him to reveal his true form and kill the enemy. When he revealed his true form, his battle prowess was almost at the peak of an adult ancient divine beast. Naturally, it was easy for him to defeat a martial great master. However, the price he had to pay was great. That was, he fell into a coma and no one knew when he would wake up. She looked at the little Fire Phoenix who was wrapped in a small fireball. He still looked like a 3-year-old human child. He seemed to be in a deep sleep as he lay inside the fireball. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.